The storm came from nowhere, not from the horizon where atmospheric disturbances typically gathered, not from the planetary weather systems that Republic meteorologists tracked with precision instruments. It simply manifested in the sky above Christophsis, like reality itself had decided to rage. Lightning arced in colors that shouldn't exist in nature, forming patterns that suggested intelligence rather than chaos. Thunder rolled with rhythms that resembled speech in some ancient elemental language. And at the center of it all, descending through clouds that parted at her will, came a woman wreathed in electrical fury. Ororo Munroe opened her eyes, pure white, glowing with power that had once made civilizations worship her as a goddess, and tried to understand where the dimensional rift had taken her. One moment she'd been in the upper atmosphere above Kenya, managing a geomagnetic storm that threatened to disrupt global communications. The next, something had torn through reality itself, pulling her consciousness and the storm she commanded into a dimension that felt fundamentally different from her own. The air here tasted wrong, not polluted or toxic, but charged with an energy that reminded her uncomfortably of encountering other mutants, power recognizing power across metaphysical distances. But this energy permeated everything, woven through the atmosphere itself, like invisible threads connecting all matter and consciousness. Below her, a battle raged. Humanoid soldiers in white armor, too uniform to be natural, suggesting cloning or manufacturing, fought against metallic automatons that moved with coordinated precision. Artillery exchanged fire between crystalline buildings that rose like frozen geometry against an alien sky, and in the midst of it all, beings wielding glowing energy swords moved with superhuman grace, their presence somehow brighter to her electromagnetic senses than anything else on the battlefield. Storm had seen war before, had fought in conflicts across Earth, from small-scale mutant skirmishes to world-threatening catastrophes, but this was different. This was industrial-scale violence married to technology she didn't recognize, and the sheer scope of destruction suggested a conflict far larger than the battle below. A squadron of angular starfighters screamed past her position, their pilots doing double takes as sensors registered something impossible. A humanoid life form hovering unprotected at 15,000 meters, surrounded by atmospheric disturbances that made their instruments scream warnings. "Gold Leader to command," a voice crackled through communication frequencies. Storm's electromagnetic senses automatically detected and translated. "We have an unidentified entity in the upper atmosphere. Repeat, humanoid figure, no visible propulsion, generating massive electromagnetic interference. Requesting instructions." "Command to Gold Leader. Maintain observation distance. Do not engage without authorization. Patching through to Jedi General Skywalker." Storm sensed attention focusing on her from multiple sources. The energy sword wielders on the ground had noticed her, their strange power reaching upward like mystical sonar. The white-armored soldiers adjusted weapons skyward, and from somewhere beyond the battlefield, something else was coming. Multiple somethings moving faster than any aircraft she'd encountered on Earth. She had seconds to make a choice: flee into the upper atmosphere where her powers would keep her safe, but leave her no closer to understanding this dimension. Descend and attempt communication, risking immediate attack from beings who clearly viewed her as a threat. Or demonstrate power sufficient to force both sides to pause their violence long enough for explanations. Ororo Munroe had been a thief, a goddess, a teacher, and a leader. She'd commanded the X-Men through impossible conflicts and ruled a technologically advanced nation as queen. One thing she had learned across all those roles: showing weakness to unknown combatants invited exploitation, but showing restraint while demonstrating power earned respect. The storm intensified at her command, not attacking, simply becoming impossible to ignore. Lightning traced geometric patterns across the sky, writing messages in pure electrical discharge that every sensor and organic eye could perceive. I mean no harm. I seek understanding. Cease fire. On the battlefield below, both Republic and Separatist forces hesitated. It was one thing to fight enemies with known capabilities. It was entirely different to watch atmospheric phenomena spell out messages in lightning while a woman hovered at the storm's center, clearly controlling forces of nature with casual ease. In a Republic command center several kilometers from the battle line, Anakin Skywalker stared at holographic displays showing the unprecedented weather system and the figure at its heart. His force senses screamed contradictory information. She felt like a living storm, power without malice, consciousness married to elemental fury. But she wasn't a force user. She was something else entirely. General Skywalker. Admiral Yulerin's voice carried controlled urgency. Our atmospheric sensors indicate this storm could level the entire city if it continues intensifying. But the entity controlling it appears to be requesting communication, not engaging in hostile action. I felt it through the Force, Anakin muttered, his mechanical hand unconsciously clenching. She's not attacking, she's confused, displaced. He'd experienced enough disorientation in his own life to recognize it in others, even when expressed through planetary scale weather manipulation. Open a channel. Wide broadcast. She seems capable of detecting electromagnetic signals. Across all frequencies in multiple languages simultaneously transmitted, Anakin's voice reached out. Unknown entity, this is Jedi General Anakin Skywalker of the Galactic Republic. You're above Christophsis during an active military engagement between Republic forces and the Separatist Alliance. If you can understand this transmission, please descend to coordinates I'm transmitting now. We mean you no harm, but your presence is creating atmospheric conditions that endanger millions of civilians. Storm heard the transmission through her electromagnetic awareness, the words translating automatically into concepts she could understand, despite the language being utterly alien to anything Earth had produced. This Jedi general sounded young, intense, and genuinely concerned for civilian casualties rather than purely focused on military advantage. A good sign, but not definitive. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. She allowed the storm to diminish slightly, not disappearing, but reducing from catastrophic to merely severe, and began her descent. Wind currents carried her with grace that made flight look effortless, her white cape billowing dramatically as lightning continued to dance around her form. She kept the electrical discharge active deliberately, a visible reminder that she could resume the storm's full fury instantly if this proved to be a trap. The coordinates led her to a landing platform where several of the energy sword wielders waited, accompanied by the white-armored soldiers who kept their weapons lowered but ready. As Storm touched down, her feet finding solid ground after the freedom of flight, she felt the familiar twinge of her claustrophobia, not triggered yet, but aware that enclosed spaces waited everywhere in this crystalline city. The young man who stepped forward matched his voice, intense blue eyes, mechanical right hand, and a presence that radiated barely controlled power. He wore robes that suggested warrior monk aesthetics, and the energy sword at his belt hummed with potential violence. But his force signature, as Storm's electromagnetic senses perceived it, carried genuine curiosity mixed with caution rather than hostility. "I'm Anakin Skywalker," he said, his natural charisma evident despite the tense circumstances. "And you've just made the most dramatic entrance Christophsis has seen since the Separatists blockaded the system. Who are you, and how did you create a storm system our sensors say violates at least 3 laws of atmospheric physics?" Storm let her eyes return to their natural blue, the white glow fading as she consciously pulled back her power. But she kept enough electrical charge dancing across her skin to make her capabilities clear. She was choosing restraint, not demonstrating weakness. "I am Ororo Munroe," she replied, her voice carrying the regal bearing of someone accustomed to command. "Called Storm by my allies. I am a mutant from Earth." She noted their blank expressions at the planet name. From another reality, apparently. "I was managing a geomagnetic storm when a dimensional rift pulled me into your atmosphere. I did not intend to interfere in your conflict, but I will not be attacked or imprisoned for the crime of existing outside your understanding." She'd delivered similar speeches countless times to humans who feared mutants, to enemies who saw her power as something to be controlled or destroyed. The words came automatically, refined by repetition, into a declaration that was both warning and olive branch. Anakin's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, recognition of someone else who'd been displaced by forces beyond their control, and a kind of hungry curiosity about her abilities. "Mutant? Dimensional rift? I've heard about strange things in this galaxy, but..." He trailed off, clearly reassessing. "Look, Storm, can I call you Storm? We don't imprison people for being powerful. The Jedi Order is built around beings with exceptional abilities, but your arrival has complicated an already difficult military situation." He gestured toward the ongoing battle in the distance, where Republic and Separatist forces had resumed their engagement after the storm's partial dissipation. "That's the Clone Wars, a galaxy-wide conflict that's been raging for years. Republic forces, like us, are fighting against the Separatist alliance, who believe the Republic is too corrupt to save. Both sides have compelling arguments, and civilians die by the millions while politicians debate philosophy." Storm recognized the weariness in his voice, the exhaustion of someone who'd seen too much violence, who questioned the cause he fought for but couldn't see an alternative to continued fighting. She'd heard similar tones from soldiers on Earth, from X-Men who wondered if their endless battles against prejudice would ever actually change anything. "I am familiar with wars that seem to have no good answers," she said quietly. "I lead a team of mutants, beings born with extraordinary abilities that make others fear us. We fight to protect a world that often views us as threats to be eliminated. Tell me, Anakin Skywalker, do your people fear those with power? Do they seek to control what they don't understand?" Before Anakin could answer, another presence approached. An older man with a beard wearing similar robes, whose force signature felt more disciplined and controlled than Anakin's barely contained intensity. He studied Storm with eyes that had witnessed decades of conflict and learned to read beings' intentions through subtle cues. "Master Kenobi," Anakin said, relief evident in his voice. "This is Storm from another reality, apparently. Storm, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, Jedi Master, and the one who usually talks me out of impulsive decisions. A role I've had considerably more practice at than I'd prefer, Obi-Wan replied with dry humor, before turning his attention fully to Storm. Ms. Munroe, the Jedi Council will want to speak with you. Your abilities are unprecedented in our experience. We've encountered beings who can influence weather through the Force, but the scale and precision you demonstrated suggests something fundamentally different. I am not a curiosity to be studied, Storm replied, electrical charge intensifying around her form, not threatening but clarifying boundaries. Nor am I a weapon to be recruited for your war. I wish to understand where I am, how to return to my reality, and whether the dimensional rift that brought me here poses ongoing danger. Beyond that, your conflict is your own. Thunder rumbled overhead, punctuating her words with elemental emphasis. Both Jedi tensed slightly, recognizing that Storm could resume the catastrophic storm system with trivial ease, that her restraint was a choice she could revoke instantly. Fair terms, Obi-Wan acknowledged. The Jedi archives contain extensive knowledge about dimensional phenomena, strange energy patterns, and Force-related anomalies. We'll share what we know freely, no strings attached. But Storm, understand that simply existing in this galaxy makes you part of larger conflicts, whether you wish it or not. Both the Republic and Separatists will want to understand and likely recruit someone with your capabilities. Storm had lived this reality on Earth, had watched human governments and mutant extremists alike try to claim her power for their agendas. The X-Mansion had been sanctuary and prison both, a place of safety that also painted targets on everyone who lived there. But she'd also learned that complete isolation was impossible for those with power. The question wasn't whether to engage with this galaxy's conflicts. It was how to engage on her own terms, maintaining autonomy while gathering the information she needed. I will speak with your Jedi Council, she decided. I will share what I know of my abilities and origins. But I make no commitments beyond that conversation. My loyalty is to my team, my people, and my world, none of which exist in this reality. Remember that before anyone attempts to make me choose sides in wars I don't understand. Anakin grinned despite the tension, his admiration for beings who refuse to be pushed around evident. I like her. She's got that "I'll turn you into a lightning rod if you annoy me" energy that reminds me of Anakin, Obi-Wan interrupted firmly. Perhaps we should escort Storm to the temple before you compare her to every strong-willed woman you've ever met. As they moved toward awaiting transport, Storm felt the weight of countless eyes upon her, clone soldiers watching with curiosity and caution, Jedi assessing her through mystical senses. She could feel like pressure against her consciousness. And somewhere in the distance, other presences taking notice of her arrival. She'd entered a galaxy at war where her power would be seen as opportunity by some and threat by others. It was painfully familiar, but Ororo Munroe had survived being worshipped as a goddess, had led the X-Men through impossible conflicts, had ruled nations and walked away from that power when it threatened to corrupt her. This galaxy had no idea what kind of storm had just entered its atmosphere. And Storm intended to keep it that way until she understood exactly what kind of tempest this Clone Wars represented, and whether it deserved the fury of an Omega-level mutant or the restraint of a leader who'd learned that power meant nothing without wisdom. Thunder echoed across Christophsis as Storm entered the transport, the sky itself seeming to watch her departure with electric anticipation. The transport ride to the Jedi Temple gave Storm her first real glimpse of Coruscant, a planet-sized city that made even New York look provincial by comparison. Every surface was developed, every horizon lined with structures that pierced through cloud layers into space itself. Trillions of beings lived here, their electromagnetic signatures creating a background hum that Storm's mutant senses perceived as a constant low-level awareness of concentrated consciousness. It reminded her uncomfortably of Cerebro's psychic feedback when Professor Xavier searched for mutants across Earth. But this wasn't artificial amplification. This was natural density of life at scales she'd never imagined possible. "First time seeing a city planet?" Anakin asked, noticing her expression as she stared out the viewport. "It's overwhelming at first. I grew up on Tatooine, a desert world with maybe a few million people scattered across the whole planet. When I first came to Coruscant, I thought I'd go insane from the sheer noise of it all. I grew up in Cairo and later lived in the Kenyan plains," Storm replied, her eyes tracking traffic patterns that flowed through three-dimensional space with choreographed precision. "I've known both crowded cities and open wilderness, but this..." She gestured at the endless urban sprawl. "This is something else. How do your people breathe? Where does weather even happen when there's no natural surface left?" "Carefully controlled climate systems," Obi-Wan explained. "The planet's original ecosystem was paved over millennia ago. Now atmospheric processors manage temperature, precipitation, air quality. Everything that used to happen naturally is now technological." Storm felt something twist in her chest. Grief for a world that had sacrificed its natural beauty for expansion. Anger at the hubris of beings who thought they could improve on nature through technology. On Earth, she'd fought against corporate interests that poisoned atmospheres for profit, had used her powers to restore ecological balance that human industry had destroyed. Here, an entire planet had been murdered and replaced with machinery pretending to be weather. "You disapprove," Anakin observed, reading her expression with the insight of someone familiar with internal conflict. "I can see it in your face. You think we're wrong for building over the natural world." "I think," Storm said carefully, "that civilizations make choices, and those choices reveal what they truly value. Your people valued expansion and centralization over ecological preservation. That's not inherently evil, but it comes with costs you may not fully understand." She called a small amount of moisture from the transport's recycled atmosphere, condensing it into visible fog that swirled around her fingers. "Weather is alive, Anakin Skywalker. It responds to pressure, temperature, the rotation of worlds, but also to consciousness, to emotion, to the collective will of all living things. When you replace natural weather with technology, you lose that connection. You make your world deaf to the voices of storms." Voices of storms. Obi-Wan's skepticism was polite but evident. "Ms. Munroe, I don't mean to dismiss your perspective, but weather is a physical phenomenon. Temperature differentials, atmospheric pressure, rotational forces. These are measurable, predictable forces of nature. And I am a force of nature who thinks, feels, and chooses," Storm countered. "Does that make me less real, less valid? Your science explains how weather functions, Master Kenobi, but not why it responds to my will, as if recognizing kinship. I don't simply manipulate atmospheric conditions. I commune with them, ask them to manifest my intent, and they answer because we understand each other." She released the fog, letting it dissipate back into the transport's air system. On Earth, in ancient times, I was worshipped as a goddess because people saw my power and assumed divinity. But I'm not a god. I'm a mutant, born with genetic abnormalities that grant me abilities baseline humans don't possess. The weather obeys me not because I command it through force, but because something in my mutation makes me part of the atmospheric systems themselves. Anakin leaned forward, his intensity focusing entirely on Storm. That's how I feel about the Force sometimes, like I'm not using it as a tool, but like I'm part of it, like we're the same thing. The Jedi teach us to serve the Force, to be channels for its will, but sometimes it feels more like partnership. Like the Force and I are having a conversation rather than me following orders. Anakin, Obi-Wan warned, that's dangerously close to heterodox interpretation. The Jedi way requires us to release our ego, to become servants rather than masters. Which is why Jedi feel so uncomfortable, Storm interrupted, recognizing the philosophical cage when she heard it. You teach beings with extraordinary abilities to suppress their individuality, to deny their connection to power in favor of serving abstract principles. I've seen that approach destroy mutants who couldn't reconcile their gifts with others' expectations. She met Obi-Wan's gaze directly, unafraid of the Jedi Master's authority. I was worshipped as a goddess, and it nearly corrupted me completely. The adulation, the power over others' faith, the temptation to believe I truly was divine, it almost destroyed who I was. But the solution wasn't to deny my power or pretend I was merely a servant of weather rather than its partner. The solution was accepting responsibility for my abilities while maintaining my humanity. And you believe the Jedi approach is wrong? Obi-Wan asked, his tone suggesting genuine curiosity rather than offense. I believe, Storm replied carefully, that any philosophy claiming there's only one correct way to handle power is lying to itself. The X-Men have no unified doctrine. We argue constantly about how to use our abilities, whether intervention or restraint serves mutant kind better, whether we're protectors or warriors or something else entirely. That diversity of perspective keeps us honest, prevents any single ideology from becoming dogma. The transport began its descent toward the Jedi Temple, a massive structure that rose above Coruscant's urban sprawl like a monument to ancient authority. Storm felt the building's presence before seeing it. The concentrated force energy radiating from thousands of sensitives living and training in one location, creating a psychic pressure her electromagnetic senses interpreted as static electricity waiting to discharge. How many? She asked quietly. How many Force users live in that temple? 10,000 Jedi, Anakin replied. Masters, knights, Padawans, younglings just beginning their training. The temple is our home, our headquarters, our connection to millennia of Jedi tradition. 10,000 beings with supernatural abilities, all following a unified philosophy, all trained to suppress individual desire in favor of collective purpose. Storm had seen that pattern before. Mutant extremist groups that demanded absolute loyalty, human governments that tried to control powered individuals through registration and restriction. The scale was different, but the fundamental dynamic felt dangerously familiar. As they landed on a private platform, Storm noticed clone troopers forming a loose perimeter, not threatening but present. Their armor was identical, their movements synchronized, and their force signatures wrong. Each clone felt like an echo of the same consciousness, variations on a single theme rather than truly independent beings. "Those soldiers," she said slowly, horror creeping into her voice. "They're manufactured, cloned from a single template and raised as warriors." "The clone army," Anakin confirmed, his tone suggesting he'd had this conversation before and didn't particularly enjoy it. "Created to defend the Republic during the Separatist crisis. They're loyal, skilled, and—" "Slaves," Storm interrupted flatly. "Beings bred for a single purpose, given no choice about their existence or role. However you justify it, Anakin Skywalker, that's slavery." The temperature around the platform dropped noticeably, frost forming on metal surfaces as Storm's anger manifested through unconscious weather manipulation. She'd been born in Manhattan to parents who descended from both African royalty and victims of the slave trade. She'd lived through prejudice, had fought against systems that treated people as property, had seen the X-Men struggle against those who viewed mutants as tools rather than individuals. And now she'd stumbled into a galaxy where an entire army of manufactured soldiers fought a war they'd been created to serve. "They're not slaves," Obi-Wan said firmly, but his Force signature carried guilt that contradicted his words. "They're citizens of the Republic, soldiers serving voluntarily." "Do they have the option to refuse?" Storm demanded. "Can they choose civilian life, pursue other careers, walk away from military service if they decide war isn't their calling?" The silence was answer enough. "Then they're slaves," Storm repeated. "Calling them citizens doesn't change what they are. Beings denied fundamental choice about their own existence. On Earth, we fought wars to end such practices, and you defend it because it's convenient for your Republic." She turned away from both Jedi, needing to control her anger before the weather spiraled beyond her conscious direction. Lightning flickered in clouds overhead, responding to her emotional state, and she forced herself to breathe slowly, to center her consciousness the way she'd learned from decades of managing Omega-level power that responded to her subconscious as readily as her deliberate commands. "Ms. Munroe," Obi-Wan said quietly, "you're not wrong. Many Jedi struggle with the moral implications of using a clone army, but we didn't create them. They existed before the war began, commissioned by someone we still don't fully understand. The choice was between using them to defend billions of innocent civilians or watching those civilians be slaughtered because we refuse to fight alongside manufactured soldiers. That's the logic of every civilization that's embraced evil for pragmatic reasons," Storm replied. "The road to atrocity is paved with impossible choices, and the belief that this compromise, this one moral failing, is necessary for the greater good." She finally turned back to face them, her eyes glowing white with barely suppressed power. "I will meet with your Jedi Council. I will learn what you know about dimensional rifts and ways to return to my reality. But understand this, I will not participate in your war. I will not pretend your clone soldiers aren't slaves, and I will not compromise my principles because your galaxy has normalized atrocities." Thunder rolled across Coruscant with unprecedented force, making the entire temple platform vibrate. Clone troopers gripped their weapons nervously, uncertain whether to treat Storm as honored guest or potential threat. And from within the temple, Storm felt multiple powerful presences taking notice, Force users who'd sensed her arrival and were coming to investigate. Anakin's mechanical hand clenched into a fist, his frustration evident. "You don't understand the situation. You just got here. You haven't seen the Separatist atrocities, haven't watched them slaughter innocents, haven't faced the choice between fighting with imperfect allies or letting evil triumph through inaction. I've faced exactly those choices, Storm replied with quiet intensity. I've watched friends die because I hesitated to use lethal force. I've unleashed my full power to protect innocence, and later questioned whether the devastation I created was truly necessary. I've compromised, sacrificed, and carried guilt for decisions that had no good answers. Don't assume my judgment comes from inexperience, young Jedi. It comes from understanding exactly what you're going through and knowing where that path leads if you're not careful. The platform doors opened and more Jedi emerged, a diverse group representing dozens of species Storm had never encountered. But at their center walked a small figure leaning on a cane, whose Force presence felt ancient and vast despite his diminutive stature. "Master Yoda," Obi-Wan said with evident relief. "This is—" "Know who she is, I do," the ancient Jedi interrupted, his large ears twitching as he studied Storm with eyes that had witnessed centuries of galactic history. "Felt her arrival through the Force, we all did. A storm with consciousness, power without malice, anger without hate. Rare that combination is, dangerous also." He approached Storm slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. And she found herself uncertain whether his frailty was genuine or performance. His Force signature suggested reserves of power that rivaled anything she'd encountered in this galaxy, hidden beneath layers of discipline and control that made the surface appear deceptively weak. "Yoda," Storm acknowledged, recognizing authority when confronted by it. "Your student claims I'll meet with the Jedi Council. I assume you're part of that body." "Grandmaster, I am," Yoda confirmed. "Lead the council, I do. But counsel you, I will not. Listen, I shall. Learn from you, perhaps. Judge you." He shook his head slowly. "Presumptuous that would be. Judge us instead. You have already begun." His perception startled her. Most beings took time to understand Storm's capability for assessment. But this ancient Jedi had immediately grasped that she was evaluating them as much as they were evaluating her. "Your clone army troubles you deeply," Yoda observed. "Right, you are to be troubled. Troubled, many Jedi are also. But understand you must. Created before we knew of them, the clones were. Use them or abandon them to Separatist forces. Our only choices became perfect solutions the galaxy rarely offers." "That doesn't make it right," Storm said. "No," Yoda agreed quietly. "Right, it does not make it. But necessary, it may be. The difference between those two, right and necessary, many conflicts in this galaxy, it explains." He turned and began walking back toward the temple entrance, his cane clicking against the platform with rhythmic certainty. "Come," Ororo Munroe called Storm. "Much to discuss we have. Your dimensional rift, your mutation as you name it, and perhaps most important, why the Force itself noticed your arrival with such enthusiasm." Storm followed, flanked by Anakin and Obi-Wan, entering a temple that housed 10,000 beings who claimed to serve light and peace, while commanding an army of slaves to fight their war. The contradiction was overwhelming, the moral complexity dizzying. She'd entered a galaxy that made the conflicts between humans and mutants on Earth look straightforward by comparison. And she had no idea whether her presence here would help anything or simply add one more element of chaos to a situation already spiraling toward catastrophe. But Ororo Munroe had never walked away from complexity just because it was uncomfortable. She'd face this Jedi Council, learn what they knew, and make her own judgments about what this galaxy needed, whether they liked her conclusions or not. The temple doors sealed behind her with a finality that made her claustrophobia spike, and Storm had to consciously suppress the panic that came with enclosed spaces. The sky was outside now, separated from her by walls and ceilings and all the architectural weight of an institution that claimed wisdom while practicing compromise. She'd survived worse, she'd endure this too. But goddess help these Jedi if they tried to cage the storm that walked in human form. The Jedi Council chamber was circular, open to the sky through transparent paneling that at least allowed Storm to see clouds and feel less trapped than the corridors had made her. 12 seats arranged in a perfect circle, each occupied by a Jedi Master whose species and appearance varied wildly, but whose Force signatures all carried that same disciplined restraint she'd sensed in Obi-Wan and Yoda. Storm stood at the chamber's center, refusing the offered seat. She preferred to stand when facing authority, a lesson learned from years of diplomatic negotiations, where body language communicated as much as words. Sitting suggested supplication. Standing with wind currents she unconsciously generated, making her white cape billow dramatically, communicated something else entirely. Ororo Munroe, Mace Windu began, his deep voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Master Yoda has briefed us on your arrival and your concerns about Republic practices. Before we address those issues, we need to understand exactly what you are and what threat you might pose to galactic security. Threat? Storm's eyes flashed white for a microsecond. I emerge from a dimensional rift, demonstrate immediate restraint despite confusion and displacement, and your first concern is whether I pose a threat. Tell me, Master Windu, do you interrogate all refugees this way, or only those with power you don't understand? Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Ki-Adi-Mundi leaned forward, his elongated head tilting as he studied Storm through the Force. Your abilities are unprecedented in Republic records. Weather manipulation at planetary scales, electrical discharge powerful enough to disable starship systems, flight without technological assistance. These capabilities make you a strategic asset. Both sides of this war will want to control or neutralize. I am not an asset, Storm replied coldly. I am a person. On my world, we have a term for those who view powered individuals as resources to be controlled, rather than people to be respected. We call them bigots. Sometimes we call them enemies. No one here seeks to control you, Plo Koon said, his voice filtered through his breath mask carrying surprising gentleness. But we must understand the scope of your abilities. The Force connects all living things in this galaxy. We sense it flowing through you in ways that suggest you're both part of it and separate from it simultaneously. That paradox concerns us. Storm took a breath, forcing her anger down. These beings weren't her enemies. Not yet. They were doing what any authority structure would do when confronted with unknown power. The X-Men had faced similar interrogations from human governments, from SHIELD, from every organization that viewed mutants as potential threats rather than marginalized people seeking safety. I am a mutant, she explained, her voice taking on the patient tone of someone who'd given this speech countless times. On Earth, my homeworld, evolution occasionally produces humans with genetic abnormalities that grant extraordinary abilities. We call these individuals mutants. I was born with the ability to perceive and manipulate weather systems at the molecular level. affecting temperature, pressure, precipitation, wind, and electrical discharge. She raised one hand, and a small storm cloud formed above her palm, perfectly controlled, generating miniature lightning that arced between her fingers without harming her. This isn't technology, it isn't learned skill. It's as fundamental to my being as your force connection appears to be for you. The weather responds to my will because something in my genetic code makes me intrinsically connected to atmospheric systems. Omega-level mutant, you called yourself, Yoda observed. Meaning what? Does this? It means, Storm replied, that my power has no theoretical upper limit. Given sufficient time and concentration, I could generate hurricanes that span continents, lightning storms that could disable planetary electrical grids, or temperature extremes that would make worlds uninhabitable. I could affect entire planetary atmospheres, potentially even influence solar radiation or cosmic weather patterns. The council chamber went very quiet. Several masters exchanged glances laden with concern. Mace Windu's hand moved unconsciously toward his lightsaber before he caught himself and forced the gesture to stillness. You're describing power that could destroy worlds, Ki-Adi-Mundi said flatly, and you expect us to simply accept your presence without safeguards. I expect you to recognize that I've possessed this power my entire adult life and haven't destroyed any worlds. Storm countered. I've been offered worship as a goddess, have ruled nations, have faced enemies who tried to weaponize my abilities for conquest or genocide. Through all of it, I've maintained control, used my power to protect rather than dominate, and walked away from opportunities for absolute authority because I understood the corrupting influence of unchecked power. She let the miniature storm dissipate, meeting each council member's gaze in turn. Your concern isn't my capability. It's that you can't control me through your force or your authority. You're accustomed to being the most powerful beings in any room, to having mystical abilities that let you influence others' minds and perceptions. But I exist outside your paradigm. You can't read my thoughts, can't influence my will, can't predict my actions through your precognition because I'm not connected to your force in ways you understand. That makes you dangerous, Mace Windu observed. No, Storm replied. That makes me free. There's a difference. Shak Ti, who'd been silent until now, spoke with her Togruta Montrals, detecting emotional harmonics the others might have missed. You're afraid, not of us. You faced interrogation before and emerged victorious. You're afraid of being trapped. The way you keep glancing at the skylights, the unconscious wind currents you generate, even when calm. You're claustrophobic. Storm's jaw tightened. She hated that her psychological vulnerability had been identified so quickly, but Shak Ti's empathic perception was clearly formidable. When I was a child, I was buried alive during a bombing that killed my parents. I've struggled with enclosed spaces ever since. It's why I prefer flight, open skies, and the freedom of the upper atmosphere. Being inside your temple, surrounded by walls and thousands of force signatures pressing against my awareness, yes, it's uncomfortable. A weakness, Ki-Adi-Mundi observed clinically, one enemies could exploit. A vulnerability I've managed for decades, Storm corrected, and one I'm sharing with you because transparency builds trust more effectively than pretending to be invulnerable. I have weaknesses, Masters. My power responds to my emotional state. Extreme anger or fear can cause weather effects I don't consciously control. My claustrophobia can be debilitating in truly enclosed spaces, and I struggle with the responsibility of wielding power that could kill millions if I lost control. She stepped forward, her presence commanding despite facing 12 of the galaxy's most powerful beings. But those vulnerabilities haven't prevented me from leading teams of equally powerful mutants through impossible conflicts. Haven't stopped me from making hard choices about when to use lethal force and when restraint serves better. And they certainly haven't made me easy prey for those who've tried to manipulate or control me over the years. Yoda's ears twitched with what might have been approval. Honest you are. Refreshing this is. Too often beings with great power claim no weakness, no doubt, no fear. Lies always. Stronger you are for acknowledging your limitations. Master Yoda, Mace Windu said, his tone suggesting disagreement with the ancient Jedi's assessment. We still haven't addressed the practical issue. Ms. Munroe possesses world-threatening capabilities and openly admits her power responds to emotion. What happens when she's threatened, cornered, or attacked? Will restraint hold against survival instinct? Before Storm could respond, Anakin Skywalker's voice cut through the chamber. He'd been standing silently near the entrance, but now he stepped forward with characteristic impulsiveness. With respect, Masters, we could ask the same question about any Jedi. Our power responds to emotion too, even though we're trained to suppress it. The difference is Storm admits that truth instead of pretending perfect control. Skywalker, Windu warned, this is a council deliberation, and she's standing here being interrogated like a criminal when she's done nothing wrong. Anakin interrupted, his frustration evident. She arrived by accident, demonstrated immediate restraint, requested information rather than making demands, and has been nothing but honest about her capabilities and limitations. Meanwhile, we're treating her like a threat because she won't bow to our authority. Anakin, Obi-Wan said from his own position near the chamber's edge. That's enough. But Storm raised a hand, stopping Obi-Wan's reprimand. No, let him speak. He's right to question your approach. I've cooperated fully, answered your questions truthfully, and demonstrated peaceful intent. Yet you discuss me as if I'm a weapon to be secured rather than a person to be respected. Is this how the Jedi Order treats all refugees, or only those with power that makes you uncomfortable? Mace Windu's expression hardened. We treat potential galaxy-scale threats with appropriate caution. Your abilities could be weaponized by separatist forces, could be used to devastate Republic worlds, could be used by the Jedi themselves, Storm interrupted. Let's be honest about what concerns you most, Master Windu. You're not afraid I'll become an enemy weapon. You're afraid I won't become your weapon, that I'll refuse to serve Republic interests, won't help you win battles through weather manipulation, won't allow myself to be recruited into your war effort. The silence that followed confirmed her assessment. Several council members had the grace to look uncomfortable with that truth laid bare. I've faced this pattern before, Storm continued, her voice carrying the weariness of someone who'd fought the same battles too many times. Human governments on Earth that wanted to register mutants, control our movements, dictate how we could use our abilities. They always claimed it was for public safety, for security, for the greater good. But it was always about control, about ensuring beings with power answered to those in authority. She turned in a slow circle, meeting each council member's gaze. I won't submit to registration, won't allow you to monitor my movements, won't accept restrictions on my freedom simply because my abilities frighten you. I'll cooperate with your investigation into the dimensional rift that brought me here. I'll share what I know about my mutation and my reality, but the moment you try to control me, to dictate where I can go or what I can do, that's when your concern about whether I'm dangerous becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Is that a threat? Ki-Adi-Mundi demanded. It's a warning, Storm replied, based on experience with beings who view power as something to be controlled rather than respected. Push me, try to cage me, attempt to force compliance through authority, and you'll discover exactly how dangerous an Omega-level mutant becomes when her freedom is threatened. Thunder rolled across Coruscant's artificial sky, responding to Storm's emotional intensity. The council chamber's transparent panels rattled slightly, and several masters instinctively reached for their lightsabers before forcing themselves to stillness. Enough, Yoda declared, his voice carrying absolute authority despite his small stature. Test each other, we need not. Demonstrate your points, you both have. Storm, free to leave this temple you are. Free to explore Coruscant, free to seek your way home, free to make your own choices. Monitor you, we will not. Control you, we cannot, even if we wish to. He stood, leaning heavily on his cane but radiating presence that made him seem far larger than his physical form. But understand, you must. Arrived in a galaxy at war you have. Sides will be chosen whether you wish it or not. Neutral ground exists not when conflicts reach certain scale. The question is not whether you will be involved, but how and on whose terms. I'll make my own terms, Storm replied. As will those who seek to use you, Yoda countered, or destroy you if use you they cannot. Prepared for that reality you must be. Powerful you are, yes, but alone also. No team of mutants here to watch your back. No Professor Xavier to provide guidance. No mansion to serve as sanctuary. Just you in a galaxy of trillions, with both sides of this war noticing your arrival. The ancient Jedi's words struck deeper than Storm wanted to admit. She was alone in a way she hadn't been since the earliest days after her mutation manifested, when she'd fled Cairo and wandered Africa learning to control powers that responded to her every emotion. The X-Men had become family, the mansion had become home, and Professor Xavier had provided the wisdom she'd needed to avoid becoming the goddess others wanted her to be. Here she had none of that support structure, just herself, her power and choices that would define how this galaxy perceived mutants, even though she was likely the only one in this entire reality. I understand, she said quietly. I'm alone, in a strange galaxy with power that makes me a target. That doesn't change my principles or my refusal to be weaponized, but I acknowledge the danger. Good, Yoda said. Wisdom that shows. Now, the archives you wish to access. Information about dimensional phenomena you seek. Access granted you have. Master Jocasta Nu will assist your research. And Storm? His ancient eyes held unexpected warmth. Welcome to Coruscant you are. Wary of each other we may be, but enemies we are not. Not yet, at least. It was as close to an acceptance as Storm was likely to receive. She inclined her head in acknowledgement, respect without submission, and allowed Obi-Wan to escort her from the council chamber. As they walked through the temple's corridors, Anakin caught up to them, his presence still radiating frustrated energy. That could have gone better. The council is too cautious, too afraid of anything they can't categorize and control. They're afraid because fear is appropriate, Storm replied. I am dangerous, Anakin. Acknowledging that isn't weakness, it's honest assessment. The question isn't whether I have the power to destroy worlds. The question is whether I have the wisdom not to, even when pressed." "And do you?" he asked intensely. Storm paused, turning to face the young Jedi whose barely contained power reminded her painfully of some of the X-Men's most troubled students. Beings with immense abilities and insufficient emotional control to manage them safely. "Ask me again," she said quietly. "After I've been trapped in an enclosed space for too long, or attacked by beings seeking to imprison me, or forced to watch innocents die because I was too restrained to use lethal force. Then I'll tell you whether wisdom holds against survival instinct and righteous anger." She resumed walking, leaving Anakin to contemplate that uncomfortable truth. Because Storm knew herself well enough to recognize that her greatest vulnerability wasn't claustrophobia or emotional weather control. It was the constant temptation to believe that sufficient power, properly applied, could solve all problems. The same temptation she could see consuming Anakin Skywalker, burning in his eyes like a coming storm, and storms, once unleashed, were very difficult to contain. The Jedi archives were vast enough to make Storm's claustrophobia manageable. High ceilings, open spaces between towering shelves, and a sense of knowledge stretching infinitely rather than walls closing in. Jocasta knew the chief librarian had been professional, if somewhat cool in her assistance, directing Storm towards sections on dimensional anomalies, force rifts, and historical accounts of beings appearing from unknown origins. Storm had been researching for 6 hours when she felt it, a shift in atmospheric pressure outside the temple, unnatural and deliberate. Someone was manipulating weather systems and doing it badly. Where her control was precision married to instinct, this felt like brute force applied with more power than skill. She rose from her study station, earning a disapproving look from Jocasta Nu. "Ms. Munroe, the archives close to non-Jedi in another hour." "Something's wrong," Storm interrupted, her electromagnetic senses screaming warnings. "Someone is creating a storm system over Coruscant, artificial, aggressive, and targeting this temple specifically." She moved toward the archives entrance before Jocasta Nu could protest further, her weather awareness expanding to assess the threat. What she perceived made her blood run cold. A massive electrical storm forming with impossible speed directly above the Jedi temple, lightning building to discharge levels that would overwhelm the building's systems and kill anyone caught in the open. But this wasn't natural weather gone wild. This was weaponized meteorology. Storm burst from the archives into the temple's main corridors, where alarms were beginning to sound. Clone troopers ran toward defensive positions while Jedi moved with urgent purpose toward command centers. Through windows, she saw the sky darkening with unnatural speed, clouds boiling into existence as if reality itself was being rewritten. Anakin nearly collided with her as he sprinted past. "Storm! The Separatists have deployed some kind of weather control weapon. Our sensors say the lightning discharge building in those clouds could level half the temple district." "It's not a weapon," Storm said, her eyes already glowing white as she reached out with her mutation to touch the storm. "It's a person, someone with abilities similar to mine but less refined. They're pouring power into the atmosphere without understanding the feedback loops they're creating. If that storm discharges naturally, it won't just damage the temple. It'll create an electromagnetic pulse that knocks out Coruscant's climate control systems. Billions could die from the cascade failures." "Can you stop it?" Anakin demanded. Storm was already moving toward the nearest exit to open sky, her cape billowing as wind currents responded to her unconscious commands. I can try, but fighting another weather manipulator is like two telepaths battling for control of the same mind. The collateral damage can be catastrophic. She emerged onto an open platform where clone troopers were evacuating civilians from the temple district. The sky above was a roiling mass of black clouds shot through with electrical discharge that made the air taste of ozone and impending violence. Storm could feel the other manipulator's presence now. Untrained power used like a hammer, forcing atmospheric compliance through sheer volume rather than finesse. "Whoever you are," Storm called out, her voice carried on wind currents to every corner of the city. "You're going to kill millions if you release that energy. Stand down and let me dissipate the storm safely." A transmission crackled across all frequencies, visual and audio, projected on every holoscreen in the temple district. The figure who appeared was humanoid, but clearly not human. Blue-gray skin, cybernetic implants, and eyes that glowed with the same electrical intensity Storm's did when her power was active. "I am Ashka Voss," the figure declared, "weather controller in service to Count Dooku and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. The Separatist Alliance will not allow the Republic to monopolize access to atmospheric manipulation. Surrender yourself to Confederacy custody, Storm, or I'll demonstrate that you're not the only being in this galaxy who commands the skies." Storm's jaw clenched. So this was the game. Dooku had found or created another weather manipulator and was using them to force Storm's hand. Either she surrendered to prevent civilian casualties or she fought while innocents died in the crossfire. It was the same hostage situation every villain eventually resorted to when facing beings with power and principles. "Ashka Voss," Storm replied, her voice resonating with authority, earned through decades of leadership. "You're being used. Dooku doesn't care about atmospheric manipulation. He cares about controlling me, and he's willing to sacrifice you and millions of civilians to achieve that goal. Power down your storm, and we can talk about this without bloodshed." "Talk?" Ashka's laugh crackled like static discharge. "The Republic Jedi have had you for hours. They've studied you, interrogated you, begun the process of making you their weapon. Dooku offers freedom. The Confederacy recognizes that beings with our abilities shouldn't serve, shouldn't bow to Force users who fear what they can't control. Join us and we'll reshape this galaxy's weather however we choose." "I don't want to reshape the galaxy," Storm replied. "I want to go home. And I certainly don't want to be responsible for mass casualties because two weather controllers were too stubborn to stand down." She reached out with her mutation, trying to gently disperse the energy Ashka had built up. But the moment her power touched the storm system, Ashka fought back, pushing more energy into the clouds, building the discharge potential even higher. It was like trying to defuse a bomb while someone else kept adding explosives. "You can't control my storm," Ashka shouted. "I've trained for years with Sith sorcerers who taught me to channel the dark side through weather manipulation. Your mutant tricks are nothing compared to mystically enhanced meteorology." Storm felt the truth of those words. Ashka's power was amplified by this galaxy's dark side energy, the same corrupting force she'd sensed in Count Dooku. It made the weather controllers stronger but also less stable, their emotional state directly feeding into the storm's violence. "The dark side is corrupting your control," Storm warned, pulling back her own influence rather than escalating. I can feel it through the atmospheric connection. Your anger is bleeding into the storm, making it unpredictable. You're not commanding weather anymore, Ashka. You're becoming it, and that's when people die. Let them die, Ashka screamed, and Storm heard the pain beneath the anger. Someone who'd been hurt, probably experimented on, definitely manipulated by beings who cared more about their usefulness than their well-being. The Republic created clone slaves and calls it justice. The Jedi preach peace while commanding armies. This whole galaxy deserves to burn for its hypocrisy. Storm understood that rage, had felt it herself when humans treated mutants as threats, when governments tried to register and control powered individuals, when Professor Xavier's dream of peaceful coexistence felt like naive fantasy against centuries of prejudice and fear. But she'd also learned that burning the world down just scorched the ground where better futures might have grown. Ashka, she said, her voice gentler now, I know you're hurting. I know beings have used you, manipulated you, treated your power as something to exploit rather than a gift to be respected. I've lived that reality, but this storm will kill people who had nothing to do with your pain. Children, families, beings just trying to survive a war they didn't choose. Then stop me, Ashka challenged. Use your Omega-level power. Prove you're as strong as the intelligence reports say. Take control of my storm and show the galaxy that there are levels to this game. It was a trap. Storm recognized it immediately. If she overpowered Ashka's storm, she'd demonstrate exactly the kind of overwhelming force that would make every faction in the galaxy desperate to control or destroy her. She'd validate the Jedi Council's fears, prove that her power made her too dangerous to leave unwatched. But if she held back, millions would die. The same impossible choice, different context, the eternal dilemma of beings with power sufficient to save or destroy. Storm made her decision. I won't take control of your storm, Ashka, she said quietly, because that would just prove to you that might makes right, that the strong should dominate the weak. Instead, I'm going to trust you to make the right choice. She deliberately withdrew her influence entirely, leaving Ashka in complete control of the weather system. The storm intensified immediately. Ashka was too angry, too hurt, too convinced that destruction was the only language this galaxy understood. What are you doing? Anakin shouted from below. Storm, you have to stop that discharge. I'm giving Ashka agency, Storm replied. The choice to be more than a weapon. The opportunity to prove that power doesn't have to serve violence. On the hollow screen, Ashka's expression flickered between rage and confusion. You're surrendering, just giving up? I'm refusing to fight you, Storm clarified. There's a difference. You want me to overpower your storm, to prove that I'm stronger, to validate the hierarchy where beings with more power get to make choices for those with less. I won't participate in that dynamic. Either you choose to stand down because it's right, or you choose to release that storm and live with the consequences. But it's your choice, Ashka, not mine, not Dooku's, yours. The storm hung in the sky like a held breath, Ashka's internal conflict manifesting in fluctuating wind patterns and unstable electrical discharge. Storm could feel the other manipulators' uncertainty, the war between rage and conscience. If I stand down, Ashka said slowly, Dooku will punish me. The Separatists don't accept failure, Then don't go back to them, Storm interrupted. You have power, Ashka, real power that doesn't need Sith enhancement or Separatist approval. You can choose to walk away from beings who view you as a tool. It's terrifying and lonely, and means accepting responsibility for yourself rather than serving someone else's agenda. But it's also freedom. Storm spread her arms, letting wind currents lift her into the air until she was hovering at the same altitude as the massive storm system. I was worshipped as a goddess, Ashka. Entire civilizations bowed to me because I could make it rain or shine according to their prayers. And I walked away from that worship because I understood that beings who need me to be a goddess will never see me as a person. Dooku wants you to be his weapon. I'm asking you to be yourself. The transmission cut suddenly. Someone on the Separatist side had ended Ashka's communication, but the storm remained, still building, still threatening catastrophic discharge. Then, slowly, impossibly, Storm felt the atmospheric pressure beginning to equalize. The storm wasn't dissipating naturally. It was being deliberately deconstructed. Energy released in controlled bursts, too small to cause damage, the massive system carefully dismantled from within. Ashka was standing down. Within minutes, the sky began to clear. The apocalyptic storm that had threatened half of Coruscant's population faded into normal weather patterns, leaving only rain, gentle, natural precipitation that washed the fear from the city like cleansing tears. Storm descended back to the platform where Anakin and dozens of other Jedi had gathered to witness the confrontation. They stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to respect to something approaching fear. "You gambled with billions of lives," Mace Windu said, "having arrived during the standoff. You withdrew your protection and trusted an emotionally unstable Separatist weapon to make the right choice. What if you'd been wrong? Then I would have stopped the storm before it discharged," Storm replied calmly. "I never truly surrendered control. I just gave Ashka the space to believe their choice mattered. Sometimes that's all people need to find their better nature." "That's manipulation," Windu accused. "That's leadership," Storm countered. "Understanding what people need to hear and see before they can make good choices. I've been leading teams of traumatized, powerful mutants for years, Master Windu. I know the difference between controlling someone and creating space for them to control themselves." Before Windu could respond, every communication system in the Temple District activated simultaneously. Count Dooku's aristocratic features appeared on every screen, his expression arranged in diplomatic regret. "An unfortunate incident," Dooku declared. "A rogue agent acting without authorization. The Confederacy of Independent Systems apologizes for any distress caused and wishes to extend a formal offer to Ms. Ororo Munroe. Join the Separatist Alliance as a free agent, not as a weapon. We respect your autonomy, your power, and your right to choose your own path, unlike the Republic, which will eventually try to control you." Storm felt the manipulation in every word. Dooku was spinning the attack as a recruitment opportunity, painting himself as the freedom fighter while making the Republic look authoritarian by comparison. It was sophisticated propaganda that would resonate with neutral systems watching this confrontation. "Count Dooku," Storm replied, her voice carrying across the same communication networks. "I respect your rhetorical skill, but I've been manipulated by beings far more subtle than you. I'm not interested in joining either side of your war. I'm interested in returning to my own reality and leaving your conflicts to the people who understand them." She paused, making sure her next words would be heard clearly across the galaxy. "But understand this, both of you, Republic and Separatist alike. I am not a weapon to be recruited, a threat to be neutralized, or a prize to be won. I am a person with power, yes, but also with principles, boundaries, and a very limited tolerance for being used. The next faction that tries to force my hand through hostage situations or propaganda will discover exactly why Omega-level mutants are classified that way. Thunder rolled across Coruscant's artificial sky, not threatening, just present. A reminder that weather itself was paying attention to this conversation. Dooku's smile didn't falter. Of course, Ms. Munroe, your autonomy is respected, but when you tire of Republic suspicion and Jedi judgment, the Confederacy's offer remains open. The transmission ended, leaving Storm standing on the platform surrounded by Jedi who were rapidly recalculating their assessment of her. She wasn't just powerful, she was politically aware, capable of navigating galactic-scale propaganda and unwilling to be pushed into hasty decisions. That was well played, Obi-Wan admitted quietly. You refused to give either side what they wanted while establishing clear boundaries. Dooku will be furious underneath that diplomatic facade. Good, Storm replied. I'd rather have my enemies frustrated than convinced they can manipulate me. And speaking of enemies, what happens to Ashka Voss now? They defied Dooku to stand down. The Separatists won't forgive that. Anakin's expression darkened. If we're lucky, Ashka escapes and disappears into the unknown regions. If we're not, Dooku makes an example of them to discourage other failures. Storm felt the weight of that reality settling on her shoulders. Ashka had chosen conscience over orders because Storm had given them space to make that choice, and now they'd face consequences for doing the right thing. Then we need to find them, Storm decided, before Dooku does. If Ashka stood down to prevent civilian casualties, the least I can do is offer them sanctuary. Sanctuary where? Mace Windu demanded. The Jedi Temple? We don't harbor Separatist agents, especially not ones enhanced with dark side abilities. Then I'll find somewhere else, Storm replied. But I won't let someone be punished for choosing mercy over violence. That's not negotiable. She turned away from the assembled Jedi, her mind already working through options. Coruscant had a population of trillions. Somewhere in that urban sprawl, there had to be safe spaces beyond Republic and Separatist control. Places where beings with power could hide from factions that wanted to weaponize them. As she walked back into the temple, Anakin caught up to her, his presence conflicted but respectful. You really care about someone you just met, someone who almost killed millions. I care about someone who made the right choice when it mattered, Storm corrected, and I understand what it's like to be powerful, afraid, and convinced that violence is the only language others will understand. If I can offer Ashka a different path, maybe they'll become something more than what Dooku tried to make them. She paused, meeting Anakin's intense gaze directly. Besides, Ashka reminds me of some of my X-Men students. Traumatized, powerful, desperate for someone to recognize their humanity rather than just their abilities. I couldn't save everyone who needed saving on Earth, Anakin. But I'm here now, and I have the power to protect at least one person from consequences they don't deserve. That's going to make you enemies, Anakin warned. I've had enemies before, Storm replied with a slight smile. What's a few more? Thunder echoed across Coruscant again, and somewhere in the city's depths, Ashka Voss heard that thunder and recognized it not as threat but as promise. The storm had noticed them, and storms protected their own. Finding one person in a city of trillions should have been impossible. But Storm had advantages that conventional searches lacked. Her electromagnetic senses could detect the unique energy signature Ashka gave off when manipulating weather, and the atmospheric conditions across Coruscant responded to her queries like an extension of her nervous system. She'd left the Jedi Temple without permission, simply walking out the main entrance while Mace Windu was still organizing council meetings about the storm situation. Anakin had tried to follow, but she'd generated wind currents strong enough to politely but firmly prevent pursuit, leaving him frustrated on the temple steps. Now descending through Coruscant's vertical city into the lower levels where sunlight never reached and Republic authority grew progressively thinner, Storm tracked the faint electromagnetic disturbances that marked Ashka's passage. The weather controller was injured. Storm could feel the irregular patterns in their bioelectric field, suggesting trauma that disrupted their natural energy flow. The lower levels were a revelation, poverty on scales Storm had never witnessed on Earth, species discrimination that made anti-mutant prejudice look quaint by comparison, and a thriving black market economy that existed entirely outside Republic taxation or regulation. This was the Coruscant the Senate didn't acknowledge, the population the Jedi's high-minded philosophy rarely reached. It reminded Storm painfully of the mutant ghettos in some Earth cities, places where beings with power were forced to hide because society above ground viewed them as threats rather than neighbors. She found Ashka in an abandoned industrial facility 3 kilometers below the city's official surface level, collapsed behind corroded machinery and bleeding from wounds that glowed with dark side corruption. The weather controller's cybernetic implants sparked irregularly, damaged by whatever punishment Dooku's forces had inflicted for their failure. "Stay back." Ashka raised one hand weakly, electrical discharge crackling between their fingers. "I won't be taken alive. I won't let Dooku turn me into—" They stopped, recognition flickering across pain-twisted features. "Storm, why are you here?" "Because you made the right choice," Storm replied, kneeling beside Ashka despite the threat of electrical attack. "And I don't abandon people who choose mercy over violence. Now stop trying to electrocute me and let me help with those wounds." She generated a small localized humidity increase and temperature drop, creating conditions where Ashka's body would naturally begin healing faster. It wasn't medical treatment exactly, more like optimizing environmental conditions for biological recovery, one of her less dramatic but more useful abilities. "I'm a Separatist agent," Ashka said weakly. "Your enemies? You're a person who was experimented on and weaponized," Storm interrupted. "I can see the scars where cybernetics were forcibly implanted, feel the dark side corruption eating at your natural abilities. You're not my enemy, Ashka. You're a victim who's been convinced victimhood equals weakness." She carefully examined the cybernetic implants, her electromagnetic senses perceiving their function. They were designed to amplify Ashka's weather manipulation abilities, but at tremendous cost. The technology literally burned through the controller's life force, enhancing power while shortening lifespan. "Slavery through augmentation. Dooku promised me power," Ashka whispered. "Said the Republic would never accept beings like us, that the Separatists valued strength over prejudice. He wasn't entirely wrong. Where I'm from, Ryloth, Force users control everything. Those of us with different abilities that don't fit Jedi categories, we're ignored or worse. The Separatists recruited me, augmented me, gave me purpose. And now they've tried to kill you for developing a conscience," Storm observed. That's the pattern with people who offer power in exchange for servitude. The moment you assert autonomy, they eliminate you as a threat to their control. She'd seen it countless times. Essex and his experiments on mutants, government programs that promised protection while really seeking to weaponize mutant abilities. Even well-intentioned groups like SHIELD that struggle to see powered individuals as people rather than assets. "I don't know where to go," Ashka admitted, tears streaming down their blue-gray face. "Can't return to Ryloth. Dooku will have agents watching for me. Can't stay on Coruscant. Republic will arrest me for the attack. Can't go anywhere in known space without one side or the other finding me." "Then we go somewhere unknown," Storm decided. She'd been thinking about this since leaving the temple, considering what her own presence in this galaxy meant strategically. She was too visible, too powerful to hide in plain sight, but the galaxy was vast and there were entire regions beyond Republic or Separatist control. "There are places," she continued, helping Ashka to their feet, "where this war hasn't reached yet, where beings with abilities can exist without serving anyone's agenda. I've been researching in the Jedi archives, the unknown regions, wild space, systems so remote they don't even appear on standard navigation charts." "That's suicide," Ashka protested. "Those regions are unmapped for a reason. Gravitational anomalies, hostile species, stellar phenomena that tear ships apart. Conditions I can navigate with weather manipulation," Storm countered. "And you can too, once those cybernetics are removed and your natural abilities are allowed to recover. We'll find somewhere beyond this war's reach. Establish a sanctuary for beings like us who refuse to be weapons." It was an ambitious plan, probably foolish, definitely risky, but Storm had learned over years of leading the X-Men that sometimes the only way to win unwinnable games was to stop playing by others' rules. If this galaxy wanted to treat powered individuals as strategic assets, she'd create alternatives to that paradigm. "Others like us?" Ashka asked. "You think there are more? In a galaxy of trillions?" Storm smiled despite the dire circumstances. "Absolutely. Beings with abilities that don't fit Force user categories, mutants if this reality produces them, individuals enhanced through technology or accident. This war has probably created hundreds of displaced, powerful beings who don't fit neatly into Republic or Separatist structures. We'll find them, offer them something neither side can provide: genuine autonomy." She was building the X-Mansion's philosophy in a new reality, creating sanctuary for those society feared or tried to exploit. Professor Xavier would approve, even if he'd question the wisdom of doing it in the middle of a galactic civil war. Before Ashka could respond, Storm felt multiple presences approaching, Force signatures she recognized from the Jedi Temple, moving through the lower levels with purpose. They'd tracked her here somehow, probably through the distinctive atmospheric disturbances her presence created. "Company," she warned Ashka. "Jedi moving fast, and they're not alone. I sense clone troopers with them." Moments later, Anakin Skywalker emerged from the shadows, flanked by Ahsoka Tano and a full squad of clone soldiers with weapons raised. The young Jedi's expression was conflicted, determination warring with respect for Storm's stated boundaries. "Storm," Anakin said carefully, "step away from the Separatist agent. Ashka Voss is wanted for attempted mass murder and terrorism. The Republic can't allow..." "Can't allow what?" Storm interrupted, positioning herself between Ashka and the clones. "Can't allow someone who chose mercy to escape punishment. Can't tolerate the idea that beings might refuse to serve your war machine, or can't accept that I meant what I said about autonomy and boundaries. This isn't about you, Ahsoka interjected, her young voice carrying surprising authority. Ashka Voss attacked Coruscant, threatened billions of lives. There have to be consequences for that, or what's to stop the next attack? The consequence already happened, Storm replied. Ashka defied Dooku's orders, suffered torture for that defiance, and is now being hunted by both sides of your war. What more punishment do you need? Execution, public trial where they're paraded as an example. How exactly does killing someone who chose conscience over orders serve justice? The clone soldiers shifted nervously, uncertain how to process a debate about justice versus revenge. They'd been bred for combat, trained for tactical situations. Philosophical arguments about proportional response weren't part of their programming. Anakin's mechanical hand clenched into a fist. You can't protect every person who makes one good choice after a lifetime of bad ones. That's not how responsibility works. Isn't it? Storm challenged. You were a slave once, Anakin. I sense it in your Force signature, the trauma of being owned, the rage at systems that treat people as property. When you escaped slavery, did you deserve immediate execution for every rule you'd broken while enslaved? Or did you deserve the opportunity to become something better? The comparison struck home visibly. Anakin's expression flickered through several emotions before settling on frustrated acknowledgement. That's different. I was a child. Ashka is an adult who made conscious choices to serve the Separatists. After being experimented on and augmented without consent, Storm countered. She generated a small electrical display around Ashka's cybernetic implants, illuminating their invasive nature. These were forcibly installed, Anakin. I can see the scar tissue where they rejected the implants initially, where Ashka's body tried to fight the modifications. This is slavery through augmentation, taking someone's natural abilities and corrupting them into weapons. Ahsoka's expression softened slightly. The young Padawan had more empathy than tactical certainty. If that's true, Master, maybe we should bring Ashka in for medical evaluation rather than arrest. If they were coerced, still doesn't excuse attempted mass murder, Anakin replied, but his conviction was wavering. The law applies even to victims of experimentation. Then your law is unjust, Storm declared. She began gathering atmospheric energy, not attacking but preparing to defend. I won't let you arrest someone for choosing mercy. If you want Ashka, you'll have to go through me. And I promise, Anakin Skywalker, that's a storm you're not prepared to weather. Lightning danced between her fingertips, not threatening the Jedi or clones directly, but making her capabilities unmistakably clear. The lower level's temperature dropped sharply, frost forming on metal surfaces, as Storm's power responded to her determination. This is treason, one of the clone commanders warned, his voice carrying the flat certainty of someone following protocols. Harboring enemy combatants threatening Republic forces, General Skywalker, permission to engage. Denied, Anakin said quickly, recognizing that combat with Storm would cause casualties his squad couldn't afford. Everyone hold position. He turned his full attention to Storm, his Force presence projecting intense focus. You really want to start a war over one Separatist agent? Make yourself an enemy of the Republic for someone you just met. I want, Storm replied with deadly calm, to establish that I meant every word I said about autonomy and boundaries. You can't have it both ways, Anakin. Either I'm a free agent allowed to make my own choices, or I'm a strategic asset you're trying to control through social pressure and tactical positioning. Which is it? The question hung in the industrial facility's stale air, forcing Anakin to confront exactly what he was doing, using Republic authority and military force to override Storm's declared intentions, all while claiming to respect her autonomy. "We don't want to control you," Anakin said finally, "but we can't just let wanted criminals escape because you've decided they deserve sanctuary." "Then we're at an impasse," Storm observed. "Because I absolutely can and will let people escape when justice looks more like revenge. So you need to decide, is maintaining Republic law worth fighting me? Worth the casualties that battle would create? Worth turning someone who could be an ally into a definite enemy?" She was gambling that Anakin's pragmatism would override his sense of duty, that the young Jedi's own complicated relationship with authority would make him sympathetic to her position. It was manipulation, yes, but honest manipulation using truth rather than deception to achieve her goals. Anakin stared at her for a long moment, his internal conflict visible in the tension of his shoulders, the set of his jaw, the way his hand hovered near his lightsaber without quite committing to drawing it. "This is a mistake," he said finally. "You're protecting someone who will probably betray you the moment it's convenient. Ashka served the Separatists. That's not something one good choice erases." "Maybe," Storm acknowledged. "Or maybe everyone deserves the chance to become more than their worst moments. I'm willing to take that risk. Are you willing to risk fighting me to prevent it?" Anakin turned to his clone squad. "Stand down. Mark this location as surveilled, but do not engage. I'm going to report this as a situation requiring council deliberation." It was as close to backing down as the young Jedi could manage, without losing face. Storm inclined her head in acknowledgement, respect for his choice, even though it clearly cost him. As the clones and Jedi withdrew, Ahsoka lingered a moment longer. "You're making enemies you don't need, Storm. The Republic already doesn't trust you. Protecting Separatist agents will make that worse." "I'm making choices I can live with," Storm replied. "Trust is something earned through consistent behavior, Ahsoka. Eventually, the Republic will learn that I mean what I say, about autonomy, about principles, about refusing to compromise my values for political convenience. Whether they respect that or treat it as threat is their choice." The young Padawan nodded slowly, something approaching understanding in her expression, and departed after her master. Storm waited until she was certain the Jedi were truly gone before allowing herself to relax. The confrontation had been dangerous. One wrong word, and it would have escalated into violence that would have defined her relationship with the Republic as adversarial rather than complicated. "You took a massive risk," Ashka said weakly, "for someone you barely know. Why?" Storm helped the weather controller to their feet, supporting their weight as they began moving toward the lower levels transit systems. "Because the first time I walked away from someone who needed help, because helping them was politically inconvenient, I stopped being who I wanted to be. I've made that mistake before, Ashka. I won't make it again." She generated wind currents that would carry them both toward the industrial level's hidden smuggling routes, pathways Coruscant's criminals used to move contraband, but which could serve just as well for moving fugitives. "We need a ship," Storm continued, already planning their escape. "Something fast, long-range, and capable of navigating without relying on Republic or Separatist navigation data." Know anyone in Coruscant's underworld who might sell to cash buyers with no questions asked?
Maybe, Ashka replied. Before the Separatists recruited me, I ran with smugglers on Ryloth. Some of them have connections here. But Storm, you're talking about buying a ship and supplies with what credits? You literally arrived in this galaxy yesterday with nothing but the clothes you're wearing. Storm smiled. Actually, I've been thinking about that problem. I have abilities beyond weather manipulation. I can sense and manipulate electromagnetic fields, which means I can perceive electronic systems in ways most beings can't. Banks, financial networks, credit repositories, they're all just electromagnetic patterns waiting to be read. You're talking about theft, Ashka said. I'm talking about redistribution, Storm corrected. Taking from institutions wealthy enough that they won't miss it to fund sanctuary for beings. This galaxy has failed. Robin Hood performed similar mathematics on Earth. Steal from the rich to help the poor. I just have electromagnetic manipulation instead of archery skills. It was ethically questionable, definitely illegal, and exactly the kind of pragmatic immorality Storm usually avoided. But she was operating in a galaxy where clone slavery was legal, where corporations funded both sides of a galactic war, where wealth concentrated in Senate hands while lower levels struggled for survival. Sometimes moral purity was a luxury refugees and fugitives couldn't afford. The X-Men wouldn't approve, she muttered more to herself than Ashka. The who? Ashka asked. My team back home, Storm explained. Heroes who try to do the right thing while maintaining legal legitimacy. They'd argue that stealing, even from corrupt institutions, undermines the moral authority we need to advocate for mutant rights. And they'd be right. But they're not here, and I'm making decisions in a galaxy where legal authority has already failed to protect people like you. She'd crossed a line, accepted that surviving in this reality meant compromising some principles to maintain others. It was a dangerous slope, one that had destroyed other heroes who'd convinced themselves that ends justified means. But Storm had advantages those heroes lacked. She'd been worshipped as a goddess and walked away from that power. She'd ruled nations and abdicated when her presence became more harmful than helpful. She understood the corrupting nature of unchecked authority. If she was going to break laws, she'd do it with full awareness of the cost and acceptance of the consequences if caught. Let's go shopping, she said, her eyes glowing white as she reached out toward Coruscant's financial networks. We need a ship, supplies, medical equipment to remove those cybernetics safely, and enough credits to establish a sanctuary beyond Republic or Separatist reach. And we need them before either side of this war decides I'm too dangerous to leave unsupervised. Thunder rolled through the lower levels, impossible weather in an environment that shouldn't support natural atmospheric phenomena. But Storm had learned long ago that impossible was just another word for hasn't happened yet. And she was about to make many impossible things happen in this galaxy, whether the Force, the Republic, or the Separatists approved or not. The world they found in wild space had no name in any Republic database, just coordinates that Ashka's smuggler contacts had whispered about in lower Coruscant's cantinas. A planet with breathable atmosphere, minimal indigenous life, and gravitational anomalies that made conventional navigation treacherous enough to discourage colonization, perfect for beings who needed to disappear. Storm stood on a cliff overlooking vast purple oceans, feeling wind that tasted of salt and ozone whip through her white hair. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy,
She felt something approaching peace. The sky here was open, the atmosphere responsive to her unconscious commands, and the isolation meant she could breathe without sensing thousands of force signatures pressing against her awareness. Behind her, the prefabricated shelter they'd assembled hummed with life support systems. Basic, functional, nothing like the X-Mansion's comfortable facilities, but it was theirs, built without serving anyone's agenda. "I'm picking up a distress signal," Ashka called from inside the shelter, their voice carrying through the open doorway. "Subspace frequency heavily encrypted. Someone's broadcasting for help about 3 systems from here." Storm returned inside, where their communications array, salvaged components married to jury-rigged amplifiers, displayed a weak signal that flickered between coherence and static. Ashka worked the controls with growing proficiency, their natural abilities stabilized now that dark side corruption and cybernetic interference had been purged. "Can you decrypt it?" Storm asked. "Working on it. Whoever sent this didn't want casual listeners understanding." Ashka paused as the signal suddenly resolved into audio. A voice young and terrified, speaking in a language Storm's implanted translator struggled to process. But the emotion transcended linguistic barriers, desperation, fear, and the specific panic of someone with power they couldn't control. "Help me. Please, someone help me. I can't stop it. The fire keeps spreading. Everything I touch burns and I can't make it stop. They're calling me a monster. They're going to kill me for what I am. Please. If anyone can hear this, I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want..." The transmission cut to static, but Storm had heard enough. The pattern was painfully familiar. Someone with emerging abilities, probably young, experiencing powers they didn't understand, while their community responded with fear and violence. She'd witnessed this scenario countless times on Earth, had been that terrified child once herself when her mutation first manifested. "We need to respond," Storm decided. "Get the Tempest Runner ready for immediate departure." "Storm, that could be a trap," Ashka warned. "Dooku or the bounty hunters could have fabricated a distress signal knowing you'd respond to someone with uncontrolled abilities. We barely survived the last ambush. Walking into a prepared trap could be fatal." "Could be," Storm acknowledged. "Or it could be genuine and someone dies because I was too cautious to take reasonable risks. I didn't create this sanctuary to hide, Ashka. I created it to offer alternatives to beings this galaxy has failed." That means responding when people call for help. She was already moving toward the Tempest Runner, her decision made. Ashka followed with a resigned sigh, recognizing that Storm's protective instincts overrode tactical caution when vulnerable people were involved. The 3-system journey took 6 hours through unstable hyperspace routes that required Ashka's piloting expertise to navigate safely. Storm spent the time meditating, centering herself the way she'd learned from decades of managing Omega-level power. She needed to be calm, controlled, projecting authority without threat when they encountered whoever had sent that distress call. They emerged from hyperspace near a small planet, agricultural, pre-industrial by all sensor readings, with a single settlement registering maybe 50,000 inhabitants. Primitive by galactic standards, isolated enough that the Clone Wars hadn't touched this system yet. But Storm's electromagnetic senses detected something wrong immediately. Massive energy discharges in the settlement center, fires burning at temperatures that shouldn't be possible without industrial accelerants, and a concentration of consciousness that felt like pure terror, amplified by emerging power. taking us down," Ashka reported, angling the Tempest Runner towards the conflagration. "Storm, I'm reading temperatures at the fire's center approaching 4,000 degrees. Whatever's causing that is someone who can't control pyrokinetic abilities," Storm finished. "I've encountered fire manipulators before, mutants whose power responds to emotional state, creating flames that burn hotter when they're frightened or angry. This person is trapped in a feedback loop. Fear makes the fire worse, which increases fear, which intensifies the flames. As they descended through atmosphere, Storm saw the situation clearly. A circular plaza in the settlement's center had become an inferno, flames rising hundreds of meters into the air and spreading despite efforts to contain them. And at the center, a figure, humanoid but details obscured by heat shimmer, stood motionless, flames erupting from their body like solar flares. The locals had formed a perimeter, primitive weapons aimed at the fire manipulator, shouting accusations and threats in dialects. Storm's translator rendered as variations on demon, cursed, and abomination. She'd heard those terms before, directed at mutants on Earth by communities that feared what they didn't understand. "Land at the perimeter," Storm commanded, "but be ready for immediate evacuation if this goes wrong." The Tempest Runner touched down, and Storm emerged from the ship with deliberate calmness. Her presence drew immediate attention. The white eyes, the atmospheric disturbances she generated unconsciously, the cape that billowed despite minimal wind. To these pre-industrial people, she probably looked like a spirit or goddess descending from the sky. Good. Sometimes divine authority worked where rational explanation failed. "I am Storm," she declared, her voice amplified by wind currents to reach every corner of the plaza. "I have traveled from beyond your sky to answer a call for help. The one you call monster, demon, cursed. They are no such thing. They are simply a person whose abilities emerged without training, without understanding. What you see as evil is terror and confusion, given form as flame. A local leader, elder by appearance, carrying ceremonial weapons that suggested authority, stepped forward with surprising courage. The fire cursed has killed 7 of our people, burned homes, destroyed food stores, threatened our entire settlement. We did not ask for sky spirits to interfere in our judgment." 7 dead, Storm repeated, sorrow coloring her voice. "That's a tragedy, but executing someone for abilities they can't control won't prevent future emergence of similar powers. It will only ensure that those who develop unusual capabilities hide them until fear and isolation make disasters inevitable." She began walking toward the inferno, feeling the heat intensify with every step. Normal humans would have been forced back long before reaching this proximity. But Storm could manipulate atmospheric conditions around her body, creating a buffer of cooler air that protected her from the worst of the thermal radiation. "Stay back," someone shouted from the perimeter. "The cursed one will kill you too." "Perhaps," Storm replied. "Or perhaps they'll recognize someone who understands what it's like to be feared for what you are." She stepped into the flames. The heat was immense, even with her protective air buffer, not quite enough to ignite her uniform, but close enough that she felt her skin tightening from proximity to temperatures that could melt metal. But Storm had flown through atmospheric re-entry before, had survived lightning strikes that would vaporize baseline humans. Pain was familiar, manageable, acceptable when balanced against saving someone who reminded her too much of herself. At the Inferno's center, she found them, a young humanoid, maybe 16 standard years old, curled into a fetal position with flames erupting from every centimeter of skin. Their eyes were wide with terror, tears evaporating instantly from heat their own body generated. "Please," they whispered, voice cracking with desperation. "Please kill me. I can't stop. I can't control it. And I'm going to kill everyone. Please just end this before I hurt more people." Storm knelt beside them, letting the flames wash over her protective air buffer. "My name is Ororo. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to teach you what I learned when my abilities first emerged. That power responds to emotion, and emotion can be managed through practice and patience." "I've tried," the young fire manipulator sobbed. "I've tried to stop, tried to control it. Tried everything, but the flames just keep coming and I don't know how to make them stop." "Because you're fighting yourself," Storm explained gently, "trying to suppress power rather than understand it. Fire responds to will, yes, but also to breath, to heartbeat, to the same rhythms that govern your biological systems. You don't shut it down. You teach it to rest, to sleep, to recognize that not every moment requires burning." She demonstrated, showing her own power at work, generating a small storm cloud above them that released gentle rain. Not enough to extinguish the inferno, but enough to show controlled manifestation, followed by equally controlled dissipation. "See, I'm not fighting the weather. I'm asking it to dance with me, and when the dance is finished, I'm thanking it and letting it rest. Your fire is the same. It's part of you, not an enemy to be defeated." The young manipulator stared at her with desperate hope, warring with ingrained terror. "But I killed people. Even if I learn control, even if I stop burning, they'll never forgive me. They'll always fear me." "They might," Storm acknowledged honestly. "Fear is often the first response to abilities people don't understand. But fear can transform into respect, given time and demonstrated responsibility. I've been feared and worshipped both, and I learned that neither response defines who I am. Only my choices do that." She extended her hand, letting flames wash over her protected skin without flinching. "Come with me. Leave this world that fears you. Learn to control your abilities in a place where power isn't automatically treated as evil. I can't promise easy acceptance or instant solutions, but I can promise sanctuary while you discover who you are beyond these flames." The young manipulator reached out slowly, their hand trembling. The moment their fingers touched Storm's, something shifted. The flames diminished slightly, responding to the emotional connection, to the recognition that they weren't alone anymore. "My name is Pyralis," they whispered. "I didn't want to be a monster." "You're not a monster," Storm replied firmly. "You're someone with extraordinary abilities who deserves the chance to learn control, rather than being executed for circumstances beyond your control. Now, can you pull the flames back enough to walk with me? We need to leave before your people decide to test whether their weapons can kill us both." Pyralis closed their eyes, breathing deeply, and the inferno began to recede. Not extinguishing completely, their fear was still too strong for that, but contracting inward until the flames were merely a corona around their body, rather than a city-consuming conflagration. Storm supported them as they walked out of the diminished fire, two beings with power that scared those around them, finding solidarity and shared experience of being too extraordinary for comfortable integration. The local leader raised their weapon as Storm and Pyralis emerged. "You cannot take the cursed one. They must answer for the deaths they caused." "They will answer," Storm replied. her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions, but not through execution or exile, through education, discipline, and learning to control abilities that no one here understands. When Piralis has mastered their power, when they can prevent such disasters rather than cause them, then you can decide whether justice requires punishment or whether preventing future tragedies serves better. She generated a localized wind current, strong enough to push the crowd back. Not violently, just firmly. A demonstration that she could impose her will if necessary, but preferred cooperation. Your people died tragically, she continued, but killing Piralis won't bring them back. It will only ensure that the next person born with fire manipulation abilities will hide their emerging power until fear and isolation create identical disasters. Let me take this one. Teach them control and perhaps prevent future deaths rather than simply avenging past ones. The elder stared at her for a long moment, then lowered their weapon. The sky spirit speaks wisdom. Take the cursed one, teach them if you can, but if they return to burn more of our people, then I will stop them personally, Storm promised. That is my responsibility, accepted freely. Now, I suggest your people focus on rebuilding rather than revenge. Piralis's flames have been contained, but structures still burn. You have practical work before you. She guided Piralis toward the Tempest Runner, where Ashka waited with weapons ready in case the situation had deteriorated. The weather controller's expression softened when they saw the young fire manipulator, recognition of shared trauma between beings who'd been treated as weapons rather than people. As the ship lifted off, Piralis stared through the viewport at their home planet receding. I can never go back, can I? Probably not, Storm admitted. But maybe that's not entirely bad. Your people feared you and you feared yourself. Now you have the opportunity to discover who you are without those fears defining you. It won't be easy. Learning control requires discipline and patience. But I've taught students with abilities as dangerous as yours. You can do this, Piralis. In the cargo hold that they'd converted into living quarters, Storm began the process she'd refined through years of training young mutants. Meditation techniques to center consciousness, breathing exercises to create biological rhythms power could synchronize with, and most importantly, the foundational truth that abilities weren't curses to be suppressed, but gifts to be understood. Why are you doing this? Piralis asked during their first lesson. You don't know me. I'm not your responsibility. You could have left me to face judgment. Because someone did the same for me, Storm replied. When my mutation first emerged, when I was terrified and alone and convinced I was cursed, Professor Charles Xavier found me, offered me sanctuary, education, a community of beings who understood what it meant to have power that scared others. I'm doing for you what was done for me, paying forward the kindness that saved my life. She paused, staring out at hyperspace streaming past the viewport. And because this galaxy needs alternatives to the binary choices it keeps presenting, Republic or Separatist, Jedi or Sith, submit to authority or be destroyed as a threat, I'm building a third option, sanctuary for beings with power who refuse to serve anyone's war machine. Is that even possible? Piralis asked. From what Ashka told me, both sides want to control or kill you. How do you build sanctuary in the middle of galactic war? One person at a time, Storm replied, starting with you and Ashka. growing as we find others who need what we offer. It's not sustainable long-term. Eventually, we'll attract too much attention, become too obvious a target. But until that happens, we save who we can and offer alternatives where none existed before. It was the X-Men's philosophy transplanted to a new reality: protection for those society marginalized, education for those born with power, and the eternal hope that demonstrated responsibility would gradually shift perception from fear to acceptance. But as the Tempest Runner jumped through wild space toward their unnamed sanctuary world, Storm couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The bounty hunters had found her once. Grievous was still hunting her, and both the Republic and Separatists were growing more interested in the weather goddess, who refused to choose sides. Sanctuary was precious and temporary. The storm season was building toward something catastrophic, and Storm had no idea whether her power would be sufficient when that final tempest arrived. But she'd face it anyway. Because Ororo Munroe had never run from storms, she'd learned to dance with them, no matter how violent they became. 2 months had transformed their unnamed sanctuary from a prefabricated shelter into something approaching a community. The roster had grown to 11, Piralis, learning fire control with remarkable dedication. Ashka, whose weather manipulation complemented Storm's abilities. 3 refugees with minor force sensitivity, rejected by the Jedi Order for being too emotional. A Twi'lek engineer whose cybernetic enhancements gave her technokinetic abilities. 2 former clone troopers who'd deserted rather than continue serving as manufactured soldiers, and a pair of siblings whose shared telepathic bond had made them targets for intelligence agencies on both sides of the war. Storm stood on the cliff overlooking purple oceans, feeling wind carry the sense of a community finding its feet. Behind her, she heard Piralis teaching one of the force-sensitive refugees meditation techniques, their voice no longer carrying the terror that had defined their first days. Heard Ashka and the Twi'lek engineer debating power distribution for the expanded shelter. Heard laughter, genuine, unforced laughter, from beings who'd spent too long believing their abilities made them monsters. She'd built something real here, small, fragile, but undeniably real. Incoming transmission, the Twi'lek engineer called from the communications room. Multiple frequencies broadcast encryption. Storm, this is Republic Military Command. They know exactly where we are. Storm's jaw tightened. 2 months of careful anonymity, of evading pursuit, of building sanctuary beyond galactic notice, and somehow the Republic had found them. She moved quickly to the communications array, where a holographic image was already forming. But it wasn't Anakin Skywalker or Mace Windu who appeared. It was a face Storm had only seen in intelligence briefings. General Grievous himself, the cyborg killer of Jedi, his mechanical voice carrying synthesized menace. Storm, Grievous began without preamble, the Republic's weather goddess, the Omega-level mutant who believes herself beyond galactic authority. I've been studying you for weeks, analyzing your tactics, researching your capabilities, preparing countermeasures for every ability you've demonstrated. His holographic form moved, and Storm saw what made this transmission different from typical military threats. Grievous stood on the bridge of a ship, and through the viewports behind him, she saw her sanctuary world's purple oceans. He was here, in orbit, right now. I have 60 droid fighters, 12 troop transports, and specialized equipment designed specifically to counter atmospheric manipulation. Grievous continued. More importantly, I have 8 Republic citizens you rescued. I believe you call them students, who I've tracked and captured over the past week, while you were distracted with expanding your little refuge. The hologram shifted to show a holding cell where 8 beings stood behind energy barriers. The refugees Storm had helped escape various conflicts across wild space over the past 2 months. She'd thought them safely relocated to neutral worlds, establishing new lives beyond the war's reach. Instead, Grievous had found them, captured them, and was now using them as leverage. Your choice is simple, Grievous said. Surrender yourself to my custody, and these beings go free. Your power will be analyzed, understood, and ultimately replicated through technological means. The Separatist Alliance is very interested in developing weather control weapons that don't require force sensitivity or genetic abnormality. You'll be instrumental in that development. I'll be vivisected, Storm replied coldly. Studied until I'm dead. My abilities reverse-engineered into weapons. That's what you're actually offering. My life in exchange for theirs. Yes, Grievous confirmed without pretense. But you're a hero, aren't you? A protector? Someone who rescues refugees and teaches them control rather than weaponization? Surely 8 innocent lives are worth more than one powerful individual's survival. Or were all those noble speeches about responsibility and protection merely performance? It was the ultimate hostage situation, precisely calculated to exploit Storm's protective instincts, her history of sacrificing herself for others, her fundamental identity as someone who put innocent safety above her own survival. Give me 1 hour, Storm said, to consider your offer and make arrangements for those under my protection here. You have 30 minutes, Grievous countered. After that, I begin executing hostages at 5-minute intervals until you surrender, or all 8 are dead. And Storm, any attempt to rescue them will result in immediate detonation of explosive charges placed throughout their holding cells. You may be powerful, but even you can't move faster than electronic detonation signals. Clock starts now. The transmission ended, leaving Storm staring at empty air where Grievous's hologram had been. Around her, the sanctuary's inhabitants gathered. Ashka, Pyralis, the clone deserters, everyone who'd found refuge here and was now witnessing their protector facing impossible choices. It's a trap, Ashka said immediately. Even if you surrender, Grievous will kill those hostages and vivisect you. He's building a reputation on killing beings with extraordinary abilities. Letting anyone survive undermines his mystique. Probably, Storm acknowledged. But if I don't surrender, 8 people die specifically because I rescued them. They're hostages because of choices I made, actions I took. Their blood would be on my hands as surely as if I'd killed them directly. Pyralis stepped forward. Flames flickering around their hands, controlled now, channeled rather than wild. Then we fight. All of us. We've been training, learning to use our abilities cooperatively. Maybe we're not as powerful as you individually, but together we'd be slaughtered, Storm interrupted gently. Grievous has specialized equipment, numerical superiority, and tactical preparation specifically designed to counter beings like us. He's killed hundreds of Jedi, Pyralis. We'd be sacrificing everyone here for maybe a 10% chance of successful rescue. One of the clone deserters, Rex, who'd taken back his original designation after escaping Republic service, spoke up with military pragmatism. What if we evacuate everyone here, jump to another system, establish new sanctuary elsewhere. Grievous can't track what he can't find. He found us once, Storm replied. He'll find us again. And next time he might not bother with hostages. He'll just deploy orbital bombardment or biological weapons or any of the dozens of ways powerful beings can be eliminated when they're caught by surprise. This isn't a tactical problem with a clever solution. This is Grievous forcing me to acknowledge that my power doesn't make me invulnerable to consequences. She moved toward the cliff edge, staring at clouds that responded to her unconscious commands, winds that shifted according to her emotional state. The sky had always been her sanctuary, her escape from enclosed spaces and impossible choices. But even the sky had limits. I'm going to surrender, she said quietly. No. Multiple voices protested simultaneously. Ashka, Piralis, the Force-sensitive refugees, everyone who'd found safety here and recognized what Storm's sacrifice would cost. Yes, Storm repeated firmly, because the alternative is watching 8 people die to protect me. And I've spent decades learning that individual survival matters less than protecting those who can't protect themselves. Grievous wins this round, I acknowledge that. But maybe my surrender buys time for all of you to escape, establish new sanctuaries, continue offering alternatives to the binary choices this galaxy forces on powered individuals. She turned to face them, her eyes glowing white with barely suppressed emotion. I'm not a goddess, despite what some civilizations believed. I'm not invincible or omnipotent. I'm just someone with power who's tried to use it responsibly. And sometimes responsibility means accepting defeat when fighting would kill innocence. This is exactly what Grievous wants, Ashka argued desperately. You surrendering, validating his belief that powerful beings can be manipulated through hostages. It sets a precedent that will get others killed. Maybe, Storm acknowledged, or maybe it demonstrates that beings with power can put principles above survival, that we're not the threats society fears we are. I don't know, Ashka. I just know I can't watch 8 people die because I was too proud to surrender. She'd faced similar choices on Earth, situations where surrendering seemed like betrayal of everything she'd fought for, but fighting would cost innocent lives. The calculations never got easier, the weight never got lighter. I need you to do something for me, Storm said to the assembled group. After I surrender, wait 24 hours. If I haven't returned by then, assume I'm dead or beyond rescue. Evacuate immediately, destroy anything that could trace back to other refugees you might contact, and scatter across wild space. Build new sanctuaries, smaller and more mobile. Don't try to rescue me. Grievous will expect that and prepare accordingly. And if we refuse? Rex asked. If we decide rescuing you is worth the risk? Then I've failed to teach you the difference between bravery and suicide. Storm replied sadly. I'm ordering you, as the leader of this sanctuary, as the person who brought you all together, do not attempt rescue. Let me go. Honor my choice by surviving and continuing the work we started here. She gathered a small pack of supplies, minimal because she wouldn't need much where she was going. As she moved toward the Tempest Runner for what would likely be her final flight, Piralis caught her arm. You saved me when no one else would, the young fire manipulator said, tears evaporating from heat their emotion generated. Taught me that power wasn't a curse. If you die because you saved people like me, that's not justice, Storm. That's tragedy. Perhaps, Storm replied gently, But tragedy with purpose beats survival through cowardice. Take care of each other. Build the community I won't be here to lead. And remember, the storm always returns, eventually. Even if this one ends, others will rise to take its place. She flew alone toward Grievous's ship, leaving behind the sanctuary she'd built and the beings she'd taught to see their abilities as gifts rather than curses. The sky felt different now, not liberating but confining, a cage she was flying into voluntarily. As she approached the Separatist vessel, Storm reached out with her electromagnetic senses one final time, feeling the planetary magnetic field, the solar radiation, the atmospheric currents that had responded to her commands since adolescence. She could fight, could unleash her full Omega-level capabilities, generate storms that would cripple Grievous's fleet, demonstrate exactly why civilizations had worshipped her as a goddess. But 8 hostages would die in the process, and Storm had decided long ago that her power existed to protect, not to preserve her own life at others' expense. The ship's hangar bay opened to receive her, and Storm landed gracefully on the deck, surrounded immediately by dozens of battle droids with weapons trained on her from every angle. Grievous emerged from the shadows, his mechanical form somehow more menacing in person than holographic representation. "The goddess surrenders," he observed with synthesized satisfaction. "How disappointing. I'd hoped you would fight. Demonstrate your full capabilities one final time before dissection. But you chose mercy over spectacle. Almost admirable if it weren't so strategically foolish." "Release the hostages," Storm demanded. That was the agreement. "Agreements with weapons are provisional," Grievous replied. "But yes, I'm a being of my word, even to enemies. Your 8 rescued refugees will be released at a neutral station with sufficient credits to establish new lives. They'll never know you sacrificed yourself for them, of course. Can't have inspirational martyrdom stories spreading across the galaxy." He gestured, and battle droids moved to restrain Storm with specialized binders designed to disrupt electrical systems. She felt her connection to atmospheric conditions diminish as the technology dampened her electromagnetic manipulation, not eliminating her power entirely, but constraining it to levels manageable through conventional suppression. "Take her to the research bay," Grievous commanded. "Begin preliminary analysis immediately. Count Dooku wants comprehensive data on how biological systems generate weather manipulation. The Separatist Alliance will develop technological replication and will deploy weather weapons across the galaxy. The Republic's atmospheric superiority will become our advantage." As droids escorted her deeper into the ship, Storm caught one final glimpse of her sanctuary world through a viewport. Purple oceans reflecting alien starlight, clouds forming patterns she'd taught them, winds carrying the scent of a community that would either survive her sacrifice or perish trying to avenge it. She'd made her choice. Now she'd live or die with its consequences. The goddess had fallen, but storms, even defeated, left lasting impressions on the landscapes they touched. The research bay was a nightmare of surgical precision and calculated cruelty. Storm hung suspended in an energy field that disrupted her electromagnetic manipulation, dampening her connection to atmospheric systems while keeping her conscious enough to experience every moment of analysis. Separatist scientists moved around her with clinical detachment, their instruments probing her biological systems, mapping her neural pathways, documenting every aspect of her mutation for technological replication. Grievous observed from a viewing platform, his mechanical voice providing commentary. Fascinating. Her cellular structure shows unique organelles that generate bioelectric fields, orders of magnitude stronger than baseline humanoids. And her neural architecture, the regions associated with atmospheric awareness, are massively developed, creating a sixth sense we could never replicate technologically. "But we can approximate it," one scientist replied, studying holographic displays. Cybernetic implants married to electromagnetic amplifiers, using her genetic material as a template. It won't match her Omega-level capabilities, but we could create soldiers capable of localized weather manipulation, enough for tactical advantages on key battlegrounds. Storm listened to them discuss her vivisection with distant horror. She'd been captured before on Earth, by anti-mutant extremists, by government black ops programs, by enemies who thought understanding mutant physiology would give them strategic advantages. But this felt different, more thorough, more inevitable, more final. The dampening field prevented her from accessing planetary magnetic fields or generating atmospheric disturbances, but it couldn't completely suppress her mutation. She could still sense electromagnetic patterns in the ship's systems, still perceive the electrical impulses running through droid neural networks, still feel the storm building in her consciousness, even if she couldn't release it. Subject shows elevated stress hormones, another scientist reported. Emotional state impacting bioelectric output. Fascinating. Her power truly does respond to psychological condition. We'll need to map the relationship between emotional states and atmospheric manipulation. Begin fear stimulus testing. Storm felt new instruments activating, generating sensations designed to trigger her claustrophobia, the research bay's walls seeming to close in, the energy field constricting, phantom sensations of being buried alive like when she'd been trapped under rubble as a child. Her mutation responded instinctively, trying to generate winds to push the walls back, electrical discharge to break through confinement. But the dampening field held, converting her power into heat that made her skin burn, feedback pain that made unconsciousness preferable to awareness. "Excellent data," the lead scientist said with satisfaction. "Her claustrophobic response generates power spikes we can induce artificially in our replicated systems. Fear becomes fuel for weather weapons. Poetic, really." Through the agony, Storm heard something else, a disturbance in the ship's systems, alarms beginning to sound, clone voices shouting warnings about hull breaches and unauthorized boarding. She forced herself to focus, to extend her dampened electromagnetic senses far enough to perceive what was happening. The Tempest Runner was attacking Grievous's flagship, and it wasn't alone. Storm detected multiple small craft, unregistered vessels that moved with the coordinated precision of experienced pilots. Her sanctuary's inhabitants hadn't followed her orders to evacuate. They'd waited just long enough for her to be secured, then launched a rescue operation despite knowing it was likely suicide. "We have intruders," Grievous's voice cut through the research bay. "Battle stations. All droids converge on the research level. They're coming for the weather manipulator." The lead scientist moved to increase the dampening field's intensity, intending to render Storm completely unconscious before rescuers could arrive. But in their haste, they made a critical error. They diverted power from the field's electromagnetic dampening to enhance its sedation functions. Just for a moment. Just enough. Storm felt her connection to atmospheric systems surge back partially. her mutation recognizing opportunity and seizing it with desperate intensity. She couldn't reach planetary magnetic fields, couldn't manipulate stellar-scale phenomena, but she could access the ship's own electromagnetic systems, the power grid humming through every bulkhead, the electrical impulses controlling droid networks, the static discharge building on metal surfaces from environmental systems. Lightning erupted from her suspended form, not generated from atmosphere, but pulled directly from the ship's power grid, channeled through her body and amplified by mutation that had spent 2 months growing stronger through regular practice teaching her students. The dampening field shorted out, the restraints holding her failed, and Storm dropped to the deck with electrical fury wreathing her body like armor. Impossible! The lead scientist scrambled backward. The dampening field should have... Storm didn't let them finish. She reached into their cybernetic neural implants with electromagnetic precision, overloading their systems with a targeted pulse that rendered them unconscious without causing permanent damage. The same technique worked on the battle droids converging on her position. She simply shut down their electronic consciousness, leaving inert metal scattered across the research bay. But Grievous was different. His mechanical body was hardened against electromagnetic interference, designed to operate even when conventional electronics failed. He dropped from his viewing platform, drawing 4 lightsabers simultaneously from trophy collections, the weapons igniting with colors that represented dozens of Jedi he'd killed. Finally, the cyborg general said with genuine satisfaction, "You fight." I was beginning to think the goddess had truly become a martyr, but desperation brings out true capabilities. Now show me the Omega-level power everyone fears. He attacked with speeds that made his 4 lightsabers blur into a deadly sphere of plasma. Techniques refined through hundreds of Jedi kills. Coordination between mechanical limbs that organic bodies couldn't match. Storm barely dodged, calling winds to push herself aside, generating localized electrical discharge to create momentary blind spots in Grievous's optical sensors, but she was weakened from hours of experimentation. Her power partially dampened still, and Grievous had been studying her tactics for weeks. When she generated lightning, he redirected it with cortosis weave plating built specifically to counter force lightning. When she created wind currents to throw him off balance, his mechanical legs anchored him with magnetic locks. Every technique she'd used across 2 months of conflicts, he'd prepared countermeasures for. "You're predictable," Grievous taunted, driving her backward toward a bulkhead. "Powerful, yes, but you rely on the same basic tactics. Lightning, wind, temperature manipulation. I've faced Force users with more creativity than..." The research bay's wall exploded inward. Piralis came through the breach, wreathed in flames, their fire control perfected through months of Storm's teaching. Behind them, Ashka generated precise wind currents that gave the fire direction and intensity. And supporting them both, every member of the sanctuary who could fight. The Force-sensitive refugees channeling their abilities. The Twi'lek engineer turning the ship's own systems against it. Even the clone deserters wielding salvaged weapons with military precision. "We don't abandon family," Piralis shouted, launching a torrent of controlled fire that forced Grievous to retreat. "You taught us that, Storm. Taught us that beings with power protect each other rather than sacrificing themselves alone." Storm felt something break in her chest, not physical but emotional. The careful walls she'd built to accept martyrdom, to embrace sacrifice as inevitable consequence of her choices. These beings she'd rescued, taught, protected, they'd rejected the narrative of her heroic death and chosen risky solidarity instead. It was the X-Men's philosophy, enacted by students who'd learned it through example rather than lecture. "You disobeyed direct orders," Storm said, but she was smiling despite everything. "We did," Ashka confirmed, combining their weather manipulation with storms to generate a localized hurricane inside the research bay that scattered droids and sent scientific equipment tumbling. "Learned it from you, actually. Sometimes protecting people means ignoring their instructions about not protecting them." Grievous roared with mechanical fury, his 4 lightsabers carving through the storm winds, his tactical processors calculating new strategies against multiple opponents. "You think numbers matter? I've slaughtered entire Jedi strike teams. I'll add all your bodies to my trophy collection." He was probably right. Even working together, they weren't powerful enough to defeat someone who'd killed hundreds of Jedi. But Storm had learned from a lifetime of team combat that victory didn't always mean overwhelming the enemy. Sometimes it meant surviving long enough to escape while creating sufficient chaos to prevent pursuit. "Ashka," Storm called out. "Temperature drop, maximum intensity, focused on the bulkheads, make the metal brittle. Pyrrhus, superheat those same points, thermal stress fractures." The 2 weather controllers worked in perfect synchronization. Ashka's cold making metal contract, Pyralis' heat making it expand, the rapid cycling creating structural failures that no amount of Separatist engineering had been designed to withstand. The research bay's walls cracked, atmosphere venting, an emergency containment field struggled to activate. "Everyone back to the Tempest Runner," Storm commanded, generating winds that carried her students towards the breach. "Rex, provide covering fire. Force sensitives, create distractions. We're leaving." "You're not leaving!" Grievous lunged toward them, mechanical limbs giving him speeds that should have closed the distance instantly. But Storm stood her ground, gathering power she'd held in reserve, not from ship systems or local atmosphere. From something deeper, she reached down into the planet below them, through kilometers of space and atmosphere, and touched the magnetic field she'd sensed since arriving in orbit. It was risky, using planetary-scale phenomena from this distance while weakened from experimentation, but Storm had spent 2 months teaching students that power without risk was just performance. Real capability meant knowing when to push beyond safe limits. The planet's magnetic field twisted at her command, creating an electromagnetic pulse that cascaded upward through the atmosphere, through the vacuum of space and into Grievous's flagship. Every electronic system not hardened against such phenomena failed simultaneously. Lights went dark, life support stuttered, and even Grievous's mechanical body seized as his processors tried to reboot. In the darkness and chaos, Storm's group escaped through the breach, racing toward their ships as secondary explosions began tearing through the disabled flagship. Storm was the last to leave, making sure every student reached safety before she allowed winds to carry her toward the Tempest Runner. As they jumped to hyperspace, leaving Grievous's crippled flagship behind, Storm collapsed into the pilot's seat with exhaustion that went beyond physical. She'd pushed her Omega-level capabilities to limits she'd never tested before, channeled planetary magnetic fields while weakened and dampened, and somehow survived an encounter with a being designed specifically to kill extraordinary powered individuals. "Don't ever disobey my orders again," she said weakly to the assembled students crowded into the cockpit. "We'll disobey them every time those orders involve watching you die for us," Peralis replied firmly. "You taught us we're not weapons or monsters, but you also taught us that being powerful means protecting those we care about. And we care about you, Storm, whether you like it or not." Storm wanted to argue, to explain that their rescue had been tactically unsound, that risking the entire sanctuary for one person contradicted everything she'd tried to teach about valuing community over individuals. But the words wouldn't come, not when faced with beings who'd internalized her lessons about solidarity and mutual protection more thoroughly than she'd realized. "Thank you," she said instead. "And I'm sorry I underestimated you, all of you. I spent so long being the teacher, the protector, the one with the plan. I forgot that students eventually become peers. You're not children who need protection anymore. You're allies who chose to stand with me." "Does this mean we get to vote on decisions?" Ashka asked hopefully. "Because I've got some opinions about our next sanctuary location that I'd like to formally propose." "Let's survive the next few hours first," Storm replied with a slight smile. "Grievous isn't dead, just temporarily disabled. He'll recover, report our capabilities to Dooku, and return with even better countermeasures. We can't win a war of escalation against the Separatist war machine." "Then we don't fight that war," Rex suggested. "We do what special forces do, strike fast, evacuate faster, never stay in one location long enough to become predictable. Mobile sanctuary instead of fixed positions. It's riskier but harder to track and destroy." "The Republic won't like that approach," one of the Force-sensitive refugees warned. "Mobile sanctuaries operating outside their authority, rescuing beings they consider assets or threats, will be classified as illegal combatants or pirates or worse." "Then we'll be illegal combatants with principles," Storm decided. "I came to this galaxy by accident, tried to stay neutral in your war, and learned that neutrality isn't possible when both sides view beings with power as resources to exploit. If that makes us enemies of Republic and Separatists both, so be it. We'll survive through solidarity, speed, and refusal to compromise our values for political convenience." She was building something between X-Men and rebellion, not heroes serving existing institutions, but people protecting each other against systems that treated extraordinary abilities as threats to be controlled or eliminated. It was dangerous, probably doomed, and exactly the kind of impossible cause Ororo Munroe had spent her life championing. "Where to then?" Ashka asked, hands on navigation controls. "The old sanctuary is compromised. Grievous will send forces there as soon as his systems are back online." Storm consulted the navigation charts, looking for systems remote enough to hide in while maintaining access to distress signals from beings who needed help. There, a stellar nursery in wild space, gravitational anomalies that made conventional navigation treacherous, and enough electromagnetic interference to mask their signatures from all but the most sophisticated sensors. There, she decided, we establish mobile operations, keep moving, build our sanctuary as a network rather than a location, and we keep doing what we started, offering alternatives to beings this galaxy has failed. Teaching control instead of suppression, building community among people who've been taught to fear their own capabilities. As the Tempest Runner jumped through hyperspace toward uncertain futures, Storm felt something shift in her understanding of her role in this galaxy. She'd arrived as a refugee seeking to return home, had tried to maintain neutrality in conflicts she didn't understand, and gradually recognized that her presence here wasn't accident, it was opportunity. Opportunity to create the kind of sanctuary Professor Xavier had built for mutants on Earth. To teach beings with power that their abilities were gifts rather than curses. To demonstrate that extraordinary capabilities and ethical behavior weren't mutually exclusive. Grievous had tried to break her through torture and hostage situations. Instead, he'd inadvertently forged her students into allies and forced Storm to recognize that martyrdom served no one. The goddess who'd surrendered expecting death had been rescued by students who'd rejected that narrative entirely. The Clone Wars would continue. The Jedi would maintain their philosophical monopoly on extraordinary abilities. The Separatists would keep trying to weaponize any power they encountered. But now, operating in the spaces between those forces, a third option was growing, and at its center stood Storm, no longer just a weather goddess, but a leader who'd learned that the greatest power wasn't controlling atmospheres or manipulating magnetic fields. It was inspiring others to become more than what fear and isolation had convinced them they could be. The storm season had reached its crescendo, and the tempest that emerged from that climax was stronger, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous to systems built on controlling the powerful. 6 months had transformed the sanctuary from a single refuge into a network spanning wild space. 15 mobile stations, each sheltering beings with abilities neither Republic nor Separatist understood, each moving constantly to avoid detection. Storm coordinated from the Tempest Runner, which had evolved from a simple freighter into something between command ship and flying school for the extraordinarily gifted. She stood in the ship's expanded training bay, constructed from salvaged components and creative engineering, watching Peralis spar with one of the newer arrivals, a Nautilon whose hydrokinesis complemented fire manipulation in ways that created spectacular steam displays. Around them, other students practiced their abilities under supervision from Ashka, Rex, and the senior refugees who'd become teachers themselves. It was the X-Mansion recreated in mobile form, the dream of sanctuary for the powered made manifest in a galaxy that desperately needed such alternatives. Incoming transmission, the Twi'lek engineer called from communications. It's Storm, it's from the Jedi Temple. Master Yoda himself requesting private conversation. Storm's jaw tightened. 6 months of evading both Republic and Separatist forces, of building their network in shadows, and now the Jedi were reaching out directly. That suggested either desperation or opportunity, possibly both. She moved to the communications array, where Yoda's holographic form materialized with his characteristic ancient patience. Ororo Munroe called Storm. Long time it has been. Much has changed, I sense. Master Yoda? Storm acknowledged cautiously. I assume this isn't a social call. The Jedi Order wants something. Want, yes, but also offer we do. Yoda's ears lowered slightly. Watched your network we have. Beings with abilities you rescue, control, you teach. Sanctuary you provide. Work the Jedi should have done, perhaps. But too caught in the war we became. Too focused on serving the Republic. Too blind to beings with power outside our philosophy. Storm hadn't expected admission of failure from the Grand Master. You're acknowledging that the Jedi monopoly on extraordinary abilities has excluded people who needed guidance. Acknowledge it, I do, Yoda confirmed. The Force, vast it is. Many paths to power it contains, but only one path, the Jedi way, we taught. Those who manifested abilities differently, ignored or rejected, they were. Mistake, this was. Your network proves it. Then what do you want from me? Storm asked. Incorporation into Jedi structure? My students folded into your order's philosophy because I won't compromise their autonomy just because the Jedi finally recognize they've been exclusive. Want none of those things? We do, Yoda replied. Instead, offer alliance. I do. The Jedi Order formally recognizes your sanctuary network as legitimate organization. Share resources. We will safe locations, medical supplies, intelligence about beings in danger. But control your network, we will not. Dictate your philosophy, we will not. Simply cooperate as equals, we would. It was more than Storm had expected. Genuine partnership rather than subordination. Respect for her organization's autonomy rather than attempts to absorb it into Jedi hierarchy. But she'd learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. Why now? She pressed. Why reach out after 6 months of silence? Yoda's expression grew grave. Because the war shifts, Storm. Darker it grows, more desperate both sides become. The Sith Lord orchestrating events? Sensed his presence I have, but identify him I cannot. He moves toward endgame, whatever that may be. And when it comes, beings like yours, powerful, independent, outside traditional structures, will be targeted for elimination or forced recruitment. We've been handling those threats for 6 months, Storm replied. Against scattered bounty hunters and individual commanders, yes, Yoda acknowledged. But Storm, what comes will be coordinated, massive, overwhelming. Both sides will move to secure or eliminate independent power bases simultaneously. Your network, impressive it is, but prepared for galactic-scale assault, it is not. The ancient Jedi leaned heavily on his cane, and Storm sensed genuine concern beneath his diplomatic words. Protect you, we cannot. Your autonomy, sacred that is. But warn you, I must. Make sure prepared you are, and offer what aid we can, as allies rather than authorities. Storm considered this carefully. Alliance with the Jedi would provide resources, intelligence, and perhaps, most importantly, legitimacy that might discourage some attackers. But it would also paint her network as Jedi-affiliated, potentially alienating beings who'd been rejected by the Order, or who viewed the Jedi as part of the problem rather than solution. I need to discuss this with my people, Storm decided. We make decisions collectively now. I'm their leader, not their dictator. But Master Yoda, understand that if we accept alliance, it's conditional. The moment the Jedi try to dictate our operations or compromise our principles for Republic politics, we walk away. No apologies, no negotiations, clean break. Fair terms, Yoda agreed. More than fair, perhaps. Discuss with your people. Contact us when decision is made. And Storm, regardless of alliance, may the Force be with you, all of you. Needed your work is, important your sanctuary proves to be. Different paths to power the galaxy needs. Different philosophies about responsibility. You provide that. Valuable it is. The transmission ended, leaving Storm staring thoughtfully at empty air. She gathered her core leadership, Ashka, Piralis, Rex, the Twi'lek engineer, and several of the senior students who'd proven themselves through months of operations. The Jedi want alliance, she explained, laying out Yoda's offer in detail. Resources and legitimacy in exchange for nothing but acknowledgement of our existence. No control, no subordination, just cooperation as independent organizations. "It's a trap," Ashka said immediately. "The Jedi don't share power, they monopolize it. This is their way of eventually absorbing us into their structure." "Maybe," Storm acknowledged. "Or maybe Yoda genuinely recognizes that the Jedi approach has limitations and exclusions that created the need for networks like ours. I've dealt with Professor Xavier long enough to know that wise leaders sometimes acknowledge their institution's failures." "What's the alternative?" Piralis asked. "If we refuse, we stay independent but lose access to Jedi resources and intelligence. That makes us more vulnerable when the coordinated assault Yoda warned about happens." "Damned either way," Rex observed with military pragmatism. "Accept alliance and risk losing autonomy. Refuse it and risk being overwhelmed by superior forces. Classic strategic bind. No good options, just least bad choices." Storm listened to her people debate, pride swelling in her chest. 6 months ago, most of them had been terrified refugees convinced their abilities made them monsters. Now they discussed galactic politics and strategic considerations with confidence and sophistication. Her teaching had worked. They'd become more than victims seeking shelter. They'd become leaders in their own right. "We vote," Storm decided. "Everyone in the network gets input. This decision affects all of us equally. I'll cast my vote last after hearing everyone's perspective. Majority decides, and we all abide by that choice, regardless of individual disagreement." It took 3 days to collect votes from across the network's 15 stations. The debate was passionate, thoughtful, and occasionally heated. Exactly what Storm had hoped for when building a community that valued individual voice over hierarchical authority. The final tally came back: 73% in favor of conditional alliance with the Jedi, provided autonomy was maintained and regular review occurred to ensure the partnership remained equitable. Storm contacted Yoda with their answer, establishing formal terms that granted the Jedi no authority over sanctuary operations, while allowing resource sharing and intelligence cooperation. It was partnership between equals, the Jedi Order acknowledging that their philosophical monopoly had limitations, Storm's network recognizing that some institutional support was necessary for long-term survival. But even as they formalized the alliance, Storm sensed something shifting in the galaxy's undercurrents. Her electromagnetic awareness detected patterns in military movements, in Republic fleet deployments, in the way Separatist forces were repositioning across multiple sectors. Something was building toward climax, the endgame Yoda had warned about. 2 weeks after formalizing Jedi Alliance, it began. Order 66. Storm was on a diplomatic mission to a neutral world when she felt it through her electromagnetic senses, a signal transmitted simultaneously across every Republic frequency, reaching every clone trooper in the galaxy. And in response to that signal, millions of manufactured soldiers turned on the Jedi they'd served beside for years. She watched in horror as news reports flooded communication channels, Jedi masters gunned down by their own troops, temples burning, children slaughtered by beings who'd been programmed for this betrayal from conception. The clone army she'd recognized as slaves had revealed their true purpose, weapons designed to eliminate the Force users. The Republic suddenly declared enemies of the state. "Storm!" Ashka's panicked transmission cut through. "We're receiving distress signals from Jedi across the galaxy. They're being hunted by clone forces. Systematic extermination. What do we do?" Storm felt the weight of impossible choice crushing down on her again. Save Jedi who'd spent millennia maintaining philosophical monopoly on extraordinary abilities, or prioritize protecting her own network, which would certainly be targeted once the Jedi were eliminated. Then she remembered Professor Xavier's fundamental teaching. You save who you can, when you can, because refusing to help today guarantees you won't be able to help tomorrow. All stations, emergency rescue protocols, Storm commanded across their network. Any Jedi send in distress signals within your operational range, you retrieve them immediately. We don't have time for debate or philosophical questions about whether the Jedi Order deserved this. People are dying, and we have the power to prevent some of those deaths. Move. The next 72 hours became a blur of desperate rescues. Storm's network moved across multiple sectors, using their mobility advantage and non-Republic affiliations to reach Jedi that official rescue attempts couldn't access. They saved dozens, masters who'd survived initial attacks, knights who'd escaped temple massacres, Padawans who'd been hidden by clone commanders with enough individuality to resist programming, but it was a fraction of what they might have saved. Thousands of Jedi died while Storm's people rescued dozens. The mathematics of atrocity, the impossible calculations that came with limited resources against overwhelming violence. In the aftermath, as the galaxy reeled from the Jedi Order's near extinction and the Republic's transformation into the Galactic Empire, Storm found herself leading a network that had suddenly become crucial in ways she'd never intended. The beings she'd rescued, Jedi survivors, powered refugees, clone deserters, now represented the largest organized resistance to the Empire's consolidation of power. She'd built sanctuary for the marginalized. Instead, she'd accidentally created the foundation of a rebellion. What do we do now? Ashka asked as they regrouped at a hidden station in wild space, surrounded by traumatized Jedi, frightened students, and clone deserters who'd broken programming to save their Jedi commanders. Storm looked at the assembled group, survivors of systematic extermination, beings with power who'd been targeted for elimination by their own government, refugees who'd learned that institutional authority could turn genocidal without warning. She'd seen this pattern before on Earth. Governments turning on mutants, humanity attempting to eliminate those they feared. Survival requiring organization and resistance rather than hoping for tolerance. We survive, Storm replied. We protect each other. We continue offering sanctuary to beings with abilities the Empire will hunt. And we refuse to let fear or trauma transform us into the kind of absolutist organization the Jedi became, or the kind of authoritarian state the Empire represents. She stood before them, eyes glowing white with determination that had carried her through decades of impossible choices. I came to this galaxy by accident, seeking only to return home. Instead, I found purpose, building something Professor Xavier taught me was possible, even in the darkest circumstances. Community for the powerful, sanctuary for the feared, alternatives to binary choices between submission and destruction. The Empire will hunt us, one of the rescued Jedi warned. They're already consolidating power, creating lists of Force sensitives and beings with extraordinary abilities. We'll be priority targets. Then we'll be mobile targets, Storm countered. We've spent 6 months perfecting the art of staying one step ahead of galactic authority. We'll continue that work, expanding it, building networks within networks until the Empire discovers that trying to eliminate decentralized resistance is like trying to stop the wind. She raised her hands, and gentle winds filled the station. Not threatening, just present. A reminder that weather existed everywhere, that atmospheric forces couldn't be eliminated through military might, that some powers transcended political authority. "We're the storm," she declared, "not the destructive kind that levels cities, the persistent kind that shapes landscapes through patient, inevitable presence. The Empire can hunt us, but they can't stop the fact that beings with power will continue emerging, continue seeking guidance, continue needing sanctuary we provide." "You're talking about decades of guerrilla operations," Rex observed. "Generations of resistance against superior forces. Storm, most resistance movements fail. They get crushed, infiltrated, or corrupted into becoming the authorities they fought against. Most resistance movements lack what we have," Storm replied. "Experience with being hunted for what we are rather than what we've done. Understanding that power and ethics aren't mutually exclusive. And most importantly, proof that beings from completely different realities can find common cause when united by shared values rather than shared species or homeworlds." She looked around at the assembled group: humans, aliens, mutants from Earth, Force sensitives from this galaxy, clone soldiers who'd chosen conscience over programming, refugees from a dozen worlds who'd found family and sanctuary. "I don't know if we'll succeed," Storm admitted. "I don't know if the Empire will fall or if we'll spend the rest of our lives hiding in wild space. But I know that building sanctuary, teaching control, offering alternatives, that work matters. Even if we fail, even if the Empire eventually finds and destroys every station we build, we'll have proven that galactic authority doesn't define who deserves to exist." "That's the rebellion spirit," one of the Jedi said quietly, "standing against overwhelming power because the alternative is accepting evil as inevitable." "Then I suppose we're rebels now," Storm replied with a slight smile, "though I prefer to think of us as educators who happen to be very good at evading Imperial forces." As the station's inhabitants began organizing for long-term resistance, as Jedi survivors started teaching Force techniques to students who'd never had formal training, as clone deserters shared military knowledge with beings who'd been sheltering from war, Storm felt the network transforming into something more robust than she'd initially envisioned. Not just sanctuary anymore, not merely refuge, but genuine alternative to the binary choices the galaxy kept presenting. Empire or chaos, control or freedom, submission or elimination. They were building the third option. The space between extremes where beings with power could exist without serving authoritarian structures or becoming isolated threats. It would be dangerous. Many would die. The Empire's resources dwarfed anything the network could muster. But Ororo Munroe had spent her entire life fighting for marginalized communities against superior forces. She'd survived being worshipped as a goddess, had led the X-Men through impossible conflicts, had learned that the greatest victory wasn't overwhelming enemies, but simply surviving long enough to offer hope that alternatives existed. The Clone Wars had ended. The Empire had risen. The Jedi had fallen. But the storm remained, patient, persistent, inevitable. And storms, given enough time, reshaped even the most resistant landscapes. Somewhere in an Imperial command center, a file was created. Ororo Munroe, designation Storm, threat level maximum, powers, planetary scale weather manipulation, status, rebel leader, priority, elimination or recruitment, no tertiary options. The Empire had noticed, and the galaxy's new authorities would soon learn what civilizations on Earth had discovered through hard experience. Beings who controlled weather itself were very difficult to cage, and attempting to do so usually resulted in tempests that no amount of military force could withstand. The goddess had become a rebel. The weather controller had become a symbol, and the storm that had entered this galaxy by accident was now fundamental to its resistance against tyranny. May the Force be with them all. They were going to need it. 5 years passed like lightning across stormy skies, brief, intense, illuminating the darkness before thunder followed. Storm's network had grown beyond anything she'd imagined when establishing that first sanctuary on a nameless world. 43 mobile stations now hidden across wild space and the unknown regions, sheltering over 3,000 beings with abilities the Empire classified as threats. Jedi survivors, Force sensitives rejected by traditional training, individuals with powers that defied categorization, clone deserters who'd chosen conscience over programming, and refugees from worlds the Empire had brutalized. It was the X-Mansion's philosophy scaled to galactic proportions: sanctuary for those society feared, education for those with power, and community for beings taught to view themselves as monsters. But the cost had been steep. Storm stood on the bridge of the Tempest Runner, modified so extensively over 5 years that only its basic frame remained from the original freighter, staring at casualty reports that never got easier to read. Ashka had died 6 months ago, killed holding off Imperial forces while a station evacuated. Peralis commanded their own cell now, their fire control perfected into an art form that made them one of the rebellion's most effective operatives. Rex had become a legend among clone deserters, proof that programming could be overcome through will and community. And Storm herself had transformed from refugee, seeking home, into symbol, the goddess of storms. The Empire called her in propaganda designed to paint her as a cult leader and terrorist. Rebel cells across the galaxy adopted her philosophy of protecting the powered, teaching control rather than suppression, building community among those society marginalized. She'd accidentally become what she'd always resisted: a figurehead, a legend, a being whose very existence challenged Imperial authority simply by refusing to submit or die. Incoming transmission, the communications officer reported. One of the Twi'lek engineers' students, trained over years of mobile operations. It's from the nascent Rebel Alliance Command. General Organa wants to discuss coordinated operations. Storm had heard whispers of formal rebellion organizing, senators who'd opposed Palpatine's transformation into Emperor, military officers who'd defected rather than serve tyranny, and various resistance cells gradually coalescing into unified opposition. Her network had remained independent, cooperating when objectives aligned but refusing integration into hierarchical command structures. She'd learned that lesson from watching the Jedi Order collapse. Concentrated authority created single points of failure. Decentralized networks survive through redundancy and adaptation. Tell General Organa I'll speak with her, Storm decided, but make it clear, we cooperate as equals or not at all. I won't subordinate our network to anyone's chain of command, no matter how noble their cause. The holographic conference that followed was tense but productive. General Organa, pragmatic, strategic, and refreshingly direct, proposed coordination rather than integration. Storm's network would maintain autonomy while sharing intelligence and coordinating major operations with Alliance forces. It was partnership Storm could accept. The rebellion needed what her network provided: mobile sanctuaries that could extract high-value targets, training facilities for beings with powers the Empire hunted, and proof that resistance existed beyond military opposition. As the years of Empire stretched toward decades, Storm's role evolved. She'd arrived in this galaxy seeking only to return home, to rejoin the X-Men and continue their work on Earth. But dimensional research had proven what she'd gradually accepted. The rift that brought her here had been unique, unrepeatable, a cosmic accident that couldn't be reversed with any technology this galaxy possessed. She was trapped here, permanently. That realization had been devastating at first. Acceptance that she'd never see Professor Xavier again. Never reunite with teammates who'd been family. Never walk the X-Mansion's halls or fly through Earth's familiar skies. The grief had threatened to drown her, to transform into rage against the cosmic injustice that had stolen her life and dumped her in someone else's war. But Ororo Munroe had survived worse losses. She'd endured her parents' deaths, had walked away from civilizations that worshipped her, had led the X-Men through conflicts that killed friends and shattered ideals. Grief was familiar territory, and she'd learned to transform it into purpose rather than letting it consume her. So she'd built what Professor Xavier would have built in her circumstances: sanctuary for those who needed it, education for those with power, and community that valued individuals over ideology. The work continued. The Empire hunted them relentlessly, but Storm's people had perfected evasion into an art form. They moved like weather itself, predictable in general patterns, but impossible to pin down specifically. Imperial forces would close in on one station only to find it evacuated hours before, its inhabitants scattered across 3 systems, with predetermined rendezvous coordinates that changed based on atmospheric conditions only Storm's network could predict. She'd taught them to read storms as communication, to use weather patterns as coordination signals, to turn her mutation from individual power into network-wide advantage. The Empire could monitor communications, crack encryption, and torture informants, but they couldn't stop the wind from carrying messages in patterns only her students understood. Training the next generation became Storm's primary focus. Beings who'd been rescued as terrified children now led cells of their own, teaching others what they'd learned about controlling power and maintaining humanity despite abilities that made them feared. The network's philosophy spread beyond Storm's direct influence. Clone deserters teaching other clones that programming could be overcome. Jedi survivors adapting their rigid philosophy to accommodate powers that didn't fit Force paradigms. Refugees creating communities that valued difference rather than demanding conformity. It was messy, imperfect, sometimes chaotic, but it was alive in ways that hierarchical organizations never achieved. Adaptive, resilient, capable of surviving losses that would shatter centralized resistance. Not everyone agreed with Storm's approach. Some Rebel Alliance commanders argued that beings with extraordinary abilities should be organized into specialized strike teams, deployed as weapons against Imperial targets. Storm refused those requests consistently, recognizing the pattern. Well-intentioned people suggesting powered individuals be weaponized just this once for crucial objectives. She'd watched that logic destroy organizations on Earth, had seen how militarization of mutants always ended, with the powerful being treated as tools rather than people. Her refusal made her controversial within Alliance command, but it also made her network's autonomy non-negotiable. They weren't assets to be deployed, and any alliance that tried to treat them as such
would find Storm withdrawing cooperation faster than lightning strike. Occasionally, in quiet moments between crises, Storm would stand on observation decks and stare at stars that weren't her home, wondering what the X-Men thought had happened to her. Did they mourn her as dead, search for her across Earth, or had Professor Xavier's psychic abilities sensed that she lived somewhere beyond his reach? She'd never know, and that uncertainty was its own grief. Mourning not for the dead, but for the living who'd never know she survived, just in the wrong reality. But Storm had learned long ago that dwelling on unchangeable circumstances served no one. She couldn't return to Earth, couldn't rejoin the X-Men, couldn't undo the dimensional rift that had stolen her life. But she could honor Professor Xavier's teachings by building sanctuary in this galaxy, by proving that beings with power could maintain ethics and community, despite circumstances that encouraged isolation or tyranny. The Empire would eventually fall. Storm believed that with certainty born from studying Earth's history, authoritarian regimes always collapsed eventually, undermined by their own inflexibility and the human need for freedom. Whether she'd live to see that collapse was uncertain, but her network would survive her death, continue her work, carry forward the philosophy she'd brought from a reality the Force never touched. Somewhere in the unknown regions, on a world whose coordinates were known only to her inner circle, Storm walked through a settlement that resembled the X-Mansion in spirit, if not appearance. Children practiced abilities under gentle supervision. Teenagers debated philosophy and ethics. Adults contributed skills from engineering to agriculture to combat training. It was community built on shared experience of being feared, united by determination to prove that power and principle could coexist. She watched Paralis teaching a young girl whose pyrokinesis had just manifested, recognizing in that gentle instruction the cycle she'd initiated: rescued becoming rescuer, student becoming teacher, victims becoming protectors. The work would continue beyond her lifetime, carried forward by beings who'd learned that sanctuary wasn't a location, but a commitment to protecting those society failed. Her white cape billowed in winds that responded to her unconscious commands, her eyes carrying the weight of 5 years leading a network under constant threat, her presence radiating the authority of someone who'd earned leadership through sacrifice rather than claiming it through force. The Clone Wars seemed like ancient history now, that brief moment when she tried to stay neutral, to avoid choosing sides, to maintain the illusion that beings with power could exist without becoming part of larger conflicts. The Empire had taught her what the X-Men had learned on Earth. Neutrality was a luxury the powerful couldn't afford when tyranny threatened those with less capacity to resist. So she'd chosen sides. Not Republic or Separatist, not Jedi or Sith, but the side of beings who refused to let fear or power define their humanity. The side that built sanctuaries instead of weapons, that taught control rather than suppression, that valued community over hierarchy. It was the side that would ultimately prevail, though the path to victory would be long, bloody, and paved with sacrifices that would haunt survivors for generations. As Storm returned to the Tempest Runner for another mission, another rescue, another desperate extraction of beings the Empire had targeted, she felt storms gathering on multiple planets simultaneously, her network reporting in, using weather patterns as communication, coordinating operations across sectors through atmospheric signals only they could interpret. The Empire called her a terrorist. The Rebel Alliance called her an asset.
Her network called her teacher, leader, friend. But Storm knew what she truly was. The same thing she'd been on Earth, the same role she'd played for the X-Men, the same purpose that had defined her since adolescence. She was someone with power who'd chosen to protect rather than dominate, and that choice, maintained consistently across years of impossible circumstances, was the only victory that mattered. The dimensional rift that brought her to this galaxy had closed permanently, severing all connection to Earth and everyone she'd loved there. But Ororo Munroe had built new family, new purpose, new home among the stars of a reality that wasn't hers by birth, but had become hers through choice and commitment. The Clone Wars had ended years ago. The Empire ruled through fear and military might. The Jedi Order had fallen to betrayal and systematic extermination, but the Storm remained, patient, persistent, and preparing for the day when conditions would align perfectly for lightning to strike at tyranny's heart. And on that day, the Empire would learn what Storm had taught generations of students through word and example. Weather was patient but never powerless. Storms could be delayed but never defeated. And those who commanded the skies could wait decades for the perfect moment to unleash fury that no amount of military force could withstand. The goddess had become a teacher. The refugee had become a leader. The accident had become destiny. And across the galaxy, in hidden sanctuaries and mobile stations, thousands of beings with extraordinary abilities, trained, learned, and prepared for the day when the Storm season would reach its ultimate culmination, when tyranny fell not to superior force, but to the persistent, inevitable power of those who refused to submit or die. May the Force be with them. They'd earned its attention through sacrifice, solidarity, an unwavering commitment to the principle that all beings, regardless of their power or lack thereof, deserved dignity, autonomy, and sanctuary from those who would exploit or destroy them. The Storm had entered this galaxy by accident, but it would remain by choice, reshaping the landscape one life at a time, until weather itself became synonymous with hope for those the Empire had taught to expect only fear.